Blood pooled black under the emergency room lights, spreading across white linoleum in a pattern that would haunt her for years. Marine Corporal Jace Brennan had 90 seconds left to live, and the only person moving toward him was the one they just decided to destroy. Veteran trauma nurse Sarah Holland watched Dr. Marcus Whitfield freeze, his hand hovering over the crash cart while he recited liability protocols like prayers. Behind him, hospital director Patricia Vance crossed her arms and said the words that would end her career. "Wait for authorization." Sarah didn't wait. She grabbed the epinephrine, dropped to her knees in Jace's blood, and slammed the needle home. His chest jerked. Air rushed back into collapsing lungs. Life returned to eyes that had started going dim. And Patricia Vance smiled, the kind of smile that comes before the kill. "You're done here," she said. "Security will escort you out." What none of them knew was that Jace had already sent one message, and the man who received it had never left a debt unpaid. If you want to see how far a fired nurse can rise when the people she saved decide to fight back, stay with me until the very end. Like this story and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this journey travels across the world. Sarah Holland's hands didn't shake anymore. 23 years in emergency medicine had burned the tremors out of her the same way fire hardens clay. She'd sutured knife wounds in moving ambulances, resuscitated drowning children in hospital parking lots, and once kept a construction worker alive for 47 minutes with his chest cracked open and her hands literally holding his heart together until the surgeon arrived. Her hands were steady when Jace Brennan hit the pavement outside Crestview Regional Medical Center in Dalton Springs, Arizona, at 3:47 on a Thursday afternoon in October. But her career, that was about to shatter. The sound came first, not the fall itself, but the wet impact of a 200-pound man collapsing onto concrete, followed immediately by the desperate whistling gasp of someone whose throat was swelling shut. Sarah was halfway through the automatic doors when she heard it, her shift technically over, her bag already slung over her shoulder. She spun back. Jace lay crumpled on the ground 10 feet from the entrance, one hand clawing at his neck, the other clutching his phone. His face had gone from desert tan to mottled red in the seconds it took her to reach him. Classic anaphylaxis, severe, fast-moving, lethal if untreated. "Call a code!" Sarah shouted toward the doors as she dropped beside him. Her hands went to his neck, checking for airway obstruction, feeling the swollen tissue beneath his jaw. His lips were turning blue. Hives erupted across his forearms like a disease spreading in time-lapse. Through the glass doors, she could see the ER intake desk. Melody Chen, the newest triage nurse, looked up, eyes wide. Then Dr. Marcus Whitfield appeared behind her, his perfectly pressed white coat catching the fluorescent light like armor. He saw Sarah kneeling in the parking lot, saw Jace convulsing, and he stopped walking. Sarah's training kicked in with mechanical precision. She unzipped her bag and found her personal emergency kit, the one she'd carried since a camping trip 15 years ago when a friend nearly died from a bee sting 3 miles from the nearest road. Inside, 2 EpiPens, sterile gloves, antiseptic wipes. But before she could crack the first pen, the automatic doors hissed open and Patricia Vance's voice cut through the hot desert air like a scalpel. "Step away from that patient, Ms. Holland." Sarah's head snapped up. Patricia stood framed in the doorway, her charcoal suit immaculate, her silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Behind her, Dr. Whitfield had finally emerged, but he wasn't running. He was watching, waiting. "He's in anaphylactic shock," Sarah said, her voice level despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. "Airways compromising. He needs epinephrine now." "Hospital protocol requires assessment by the attending physician before medication is administered," Patricia replied. She didn't even look at Jace, whose breathing had deteriorated to shallow, rasping attempts. "Dr. Whitfield will handle this." Sarah looked at Marcus Whitfield, Harvard Med, chief of emergency medicine for the past 8 months, the man who'd spent more time updating his LinkedIn profile than actually touching patients. His hand had reached the crash cart they'd wheeled out behind him, but he hadn't grabbed anything from it. He was looking at Patricia. "We need to establish liability parameters," Marcus said, and Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "If this is a service member, there are specific protocols." "He's dying!" Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. Right now, in front of all of you. Jace's back arched, his eyes rolled back. The sound he made wasn't even a wheeze anymore. It was nothing because his airway had swollen completely shut. Sarah made her choice. She ripped open the EpiPen, yanked up Jace's sleeve, and drove the needle into his thigh with enough force to punch through muscle. The spring-loaded mechanism released 0.3 milligrams of epinephrine directly into his system. She held it there, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then pulled it out and tossed it aside. For 10 seconds that felt like 10 years, nothing happened. Then Jace's chest jerked. His throat made a sound like a pipe unclogging. Air rushed into his lungs in a massive, desperate gasp. His eyes flew open, wild and confused but alive. Sarah rolled him into recovery position as he coughed and gasped, color slowly returning to his face. "You're okay," she said quietly, her hand on his shoulder. "You're breathing. You're going to be fine." Behind her, she heard Patricia's heels clicking on the pavement, sharp, deliberate, the sound of a decision already made. "Ms. Holland," Patricia said, her voice devoid of anything resembling warmth, "you've just committed a terminable offense." Sarah stood slowly, turning to face the hospital director. In her peripheral vision, she could see other staff members gathering in the doorway now, nurses, orderlies, even a janitor who'd stopped mid-sweep to watch. Nobody was helping with Jace. They were all just watching the execution. "I saved his life," Sarah said. "You violated direct orders from both your administrator and the attending physician," Patricia replied. "You administered medication without authorization, without consent, without proper documentation. You assumed liability that could cost this hospital millions if anything goes wrong. If I hadn't acted, he'd be dead right now." That assessment wasn't yours to make. The heat rising from the asphalt made the air shimmer between them. Sarah could feel sweat trickling down her spine, could hear Jace's breathing stabilizing behind her, could see the absolute certainty in Patricia Vance's eyes. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings," Patricia continued. "You're terminated effective immediately. If you return to hospital property, you'll be arrested for trespassing." Marcus Whitfield finally moved then, kneeling beside Jace with a stethoscope he definitely should have been using 5 minutes earlier. He didn't look at Sarah. Nobody did, except Melody, whose young face showed something that might have been sympathy, but was definitely too frightened to become support. 2 security guards Sarah had known for years approached from the building. Tom Reeves, who'd shown her pictures of his granddaughter every morning. Daniel Park, who she'd helped when he'd sliced his hand open on a broken window last summer. "Sorry, Sarah," Tom muttered as they flanked her. "Just following orders," Daniel added, not meeting her eyes. "I know," Sarah said quietly. She looked down at Jace one more time. He was conscious now, breathing hard but breathing, his hand still clutching his phone. Their eyes met for a moment. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Sarah nodded. Then she let security walk her back inside, through the ER she'd worked in for 14 years, past the nurses' station where she'd trained half the current staff, into the break room where her locker waited. 15 minutes later, she walked out carrying a cardboard box with a cactus plant, a framed photo of her daughter's college graduation, 3 coffee mugs, and a career's worth of memories she couldn't pack. The afternoon sun hit her like a wall of heat. October in Dalton Springs meant temperatures still pushing 90, the kind of dry heat that sucked moisture from your skin and left you feeling mummified. Sarah's car was parked in the far corner of the employee lot, a good quarter-mile walk carrying a box that seemed to get heavier with each step. She made it halfway before the shaking started. Not her hands, those were still steady, but something deeper. Her legs felt weak, her chest tight. 23 years of service ended in 15 minutes because she'd chosen a life over a policy. Sarah set the box down on the hood of someone else's car and pressed her palms flat against the warm metal, fighting the sensation that she might actually collapse. She'd faced trauma, death, impossible odds, and never broke. But this felt different. This felt like punishment for doing what she'd sworn an oath to do. Her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter Jessica, away at grad school in California. "Mom, you okay? Your weird 6th sense is tingling. Call me." Sarah almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she picked up her box and kept walking. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Jace Brennan's phone had been in his hand when he collapsed, and the message he'd sent before his throat closed hadn't been to 911 or his unit. It had been to his uncle, a man named Cole Brennan, who ran a motorcycle club out of Prescott and who had served 2 tours in Fallujah before coming home to build something that looked like a family. The message was simple. Dying. Hospital won't help. Nurse saved me. They fired her. Cole read it at 4:03 p.m., sitting in the office of his motorcycle repair shop, surrounded by tools and leather and men who'd followed him through worse than hospital politics. By 4:06 p.m., he'd made 4 phone calls. By 4:15 p.m., 36 motorcycles were rolling south on Highway 89. By 4:30 p.m., a Marine colonel in Yuma had activated protocols that most civilians didn't know existed. But Sarah knew none of this. She was focused on putting one foot in front of the other, carrying her box toward a future that felt as empty as the desert stretching endlessly around Dalton Springs. Behind her, inside Crestview Regional, Patricia Vance was already spinning the narrative. She'd called an emergency meeting with the hospital's legal team and board members, painting Sarah as a reckless veteran who'd finally gone too far. She's been flagged for procedural violations before, Patricia told them, lying smoothly. This was bound to happen. We're better off without the liability. Nobody questioned her. Nobody checked the security footage. Nobody asked why a trauma nurse with a spotless record would suddenly become reckless after 2 decades of excellence. Marcus Whitfield sat in that meeting, silent and complicit, already composing the incident report that would bury Sarah's version of events under medical terminology and hospital policy. And Jace Brennan, recovering in an ER bed with oxygen and antihistamines flowing through his IV, kept checking his phone, waiting for his uncle's reply, getting angrier with each passing minute as nurses who'd watched him nearly die now pretended to care. A young orderly named Kevin Wu brought him water and asked what had happened. I got stung by something in the parking lot, Jace said, his voice still rough. Dropped like a rock. Couldn't breathe. Thought I was done. He gestured toward the window. That nurse, the one they walked out, she didn't even hesitate. Saved my life while the doctors were arguing about paperwork. They fired her, Kevin said quietly. Ms. Vance announced it in the staff meeting, said she violated protocols. What's her name? Sarah Holland. Best trauma nurse we had. Jace pulled up his phone and typed with hands that were steadier now. Her name is Sarah Holland. Find her. Cole's response came instantly. Already on it, 20 minutes out. Jason. Sarah had reached her car by the time the first wave hit. She'd just set the box in her trunk when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. Is this Sarah Holland? A woman's voice, official sounding. Yes. This is Monica Reyes from the Arizona State Nursing Board. We've received a report regarding an incident at Crestview Regional this afternoon. I need to inform you that your license is under review pending investigation. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course. Patricia wouldn't just fire her. She'd destroy her, make sure she couldn't work anywhere else. I saved a patient's life, Sarah said. That's not how the report describes it. You'll receive official notification by mail. Until then, you're not to practice nursing in any capacity. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the parking lot, phone in hand, and felt the full weight of what had just happened. Not just fired, professionally destroyed, her license suspended, her reputation being systematically dismantled by a hospital administration that valued liability protection over human life. She got in her car and started driving, not toward home, but just away. Out of the parking lot, onto the frontage road, then onto the highway heading west. The desert rolled past in shades of brown and gold, mountains rising in the distance like ancient witnesses to human stupidity. At a red light on the edge of town, she saw them. Motorcycles, dozens of them, rolling through the intersection in perfect formation. Big bikes, the kind that announced themselves from a mile away. Riders in leather and denim, some with military patches visible on their vests. They weren't speeding, weren't weaving, just moving with absolute purpose, heading east toward the hospital she'd just left. The light turned green. Sarah drove through the intersection as the last of the bikes rumbled past. In her rearview mirror, she watched them disappear, wondering vaguely what brought a motorcycle club to Dalton Springs on a random Thursday afternoon. She'd find out soon enough. At Crestview Regional, the security guard at the front desk saw them first. Tom Reeves, the same man who'd escorted Sarah out an hour earlier, looked up from his magazine to see motorcycles filling the parking lot. Not circling, not revving engines, just arriving, parking in neat rows, riders dismounting and standing beside their bikes like soldiers at attention. Tom counted 20 bikes, then 30, then stopped counting because more kept coming. He reached for his radio. We've got a situation in the front lot. Large group of motorcycle riders. No visible aggression, but there's a lot of them. Inside the hospital, Patricia Vance was in her office, reviewing the termination paperwork she'd processed for Sarah Holland, making sure every detail was legally bulletproof. Her phone buzzed. Security desk. Ms. Vance, you should probably come to the front entrance. I'm busy, Tom. What is it? There's about 40 bikers outside. They're not doing anything, just standing there. It's making people nervous. Patricia set down her pen. Call the police. Have them moved along for loitering. Already tried. Police say they're on public property and not breaking any laws. They suggested you talk to them. Patricia's jaw tightened. She stood, smoothed her suit, and walked toward the front entrance with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never encountered a problem she couldn't administratively solve. The automatic doors opened, and she stepped into heat that felt 5 degrees hotter than it had an hour ago. The parking lot looked like a motorcycle rally, bikes everywhere, riders standing in loose groups, some smoking, some checking their phones, all of them watching the hospital entrance. And in front of them, leaning against a massive Harley-Davidson with flame decals, stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same rock as the surrounding mountains. Tall, broad-shouldered, late 40s, with a closely trimmed beard going gray and eyes that had seen things Patricia couldn't imagine. His leather vest displayed patches, USMC, a name tag reading Cole, and a club insignia she didn't recognize. He straightened as she approached. I'm Patricia Vance, hospital director, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. You're creating a disturbance. I need you to disperse. Cole Brennan looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't friendly. My nephew almost died in your parking lot today, he said quietly. A nurse saved his life. You fired her for it. We're here to make sure that story gets told right. Your nephew received appropriate medical care according to established protocols, Patricia replied smoothly. The employee who was terminated violated multiple hospital policies. This doesn't concern you. That employee's name is Sarah Holland, Cole said, and everything that concerns my nephew concerns me. Behind him, the gathered riders shifted slightly. Not threateningly, just enough to remind Patricia that she was one person facing 40 men and women who'd ridden 80 miles to be here. If you don't leave immediately, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and intimidation, Patricia said. Cole pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. You should check your email. Probably came in about 5 minutes ago. Patricia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, keeping her eyes on Cole, and glanced at the screen. The email was from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Subject line, Emergency Investigation Initiated, Crestview Regional Medical Center. She opened it. Pursuant to reports of improper emergency care protocols and potential patient endangerment, this department is initiating an immediate investigation into practices at Crestview Regional Medical Center, effective immediately. All relevant security footage and medical records are to be preserved pending review. Failure to comply may result in sanctions up to and including license revocation. Patricia's face went white. How did you... I made some calls, Cole said simply. Turns out when a Marine almost dies because hospital staff wouldn't help him, and a nurse gets fired for saving him, people get interested, especially people in positions to do something about it. The sound of rotors cut through the desert air. Patricia looked up. 2 helicopters were approaching from the south, flying low and fast. Not police helicopters, military transport birds, UH-60 Blackhawks with Marine Corps markings clearly visible. They circled once, then descended toward the large open field adjacent to the hospital parking lot, the field that was technically hospital property but never used for anything except the occasional staff picnic. Dust exploded outward as they touched down. The rotors stayed spinning, and before Patricia could process what was happening, the side doors opened and Marines in dress uniforms began stepping out. Leading them was a man in his 50s wearing the insignia of a full colonel, his chest displaying enough ribbons to tell a story of decades in service. He walked straight toward the hospital entrance, his bearing radiating an authority that made Patricia's administrative power look like a child playing dress-up. Cole straightened, and despite clearly knowing this was coming, there was respect in the way he stood at attention. The colonel stopped in front of Patricia. His name tag read Morrison. "I'm Colonel Richard Morrison, USMC," he said. "I'm here about Corporal Jace Brennan and the nurse who saved his life while your staff deliberated. Where is she?" Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "She's gone," Cole answered. "Fired. Walked out carrying a box about 90 minutes ago." Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. "Then we have a problem. Because I just reviewed your security footage, the portions visible from public access areas, and what I saw was a decorated trauma nurse performing emergency life-saving care while your medical staff stood by and watched a Marine die. Is that an accurate assessment?" "That's not—" "There were protocols," Patricia stammered. "Protocols," Morrison repeated. The word sounded like a weapon. "Corporal Brennan is 23 years old. He's served 2 combat deployments. He survived Helmand Province, and he nearly died in your parking lot because your protocols were more important than his life." Behind Morrison, more Marines had assembled, along with medical personnel carrying equipment. One of them approached Cole and spoke quietly. Cole nodded, then gestured toward the hospital entrance. "Corporal Brennan is still inside receiving treatment," Morrison said. "I'm removing him to VA Medical Center in Phoenix, where he'll receive care from people who remember what first do no harm actually means." "You can't just—" Patricia started. "I can, and I am. He's a service member who was endangered by your negligence. I have the authority to remove him from your care, and I'm exercising it." The Marines moved past Patricia like she was furniture, striding through the automatic doors with medical equipment and a stretcher. Through the glass, she could see the ER staff scrambling, Dr. Whitfield appearing from somewhere, confusion spreading. Cole watched them go, then looked back at Patricia. "You destroyed a good nurse's career to cover your own mistakes. Thought nobody would care about one more medical worker getting thrown away. You were wrong." Patricia's phone started buzzing. She looked down to see calls coming in. The hospital board chairman, the county health inspector, a number she recognized as belonging to a state senator. "My nephew's alive because Sarah Holland didn't wait for permission to save him," Cole continued. "She did her job, and you punished her for it. That ends now." "This is harassment," Patricia said, but her voice shook. "I'll have all of you arrested." "For what? Standing in a parking lot? Flying legally registered aircraft? Exercising our right to be concerned citizens?" Cole shook his head. "You're good at throwing around administrative power, Ms. Vance, but out here, in the real world, where people actually matter more than policies, you don't have any." Inside the hospital, the Marines had reached Jace's bed. Colonel Morrison entered his room, and through the windows, hospital staff could see him snap a salute. Jace, still weak but conscious, returned it from his bed. Dr. Whitfield tried to intervene. "You can't remove a patient without—" "I just did," Morrison said flatly. "You'll receive transfer documentation within the hour. Your objection is noted and disregarded." They moved Jace onto their stretcher with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they were back outside, loading him into one of the helicopters. Medical equipment, IV bags, everything transferred with military precision. Patricia stood frozen, watching her authority crumble in real time. She'd fired Sarah Holland to protect the hospital from liability, to demonstrate that insubordination wouldn't be tolerated, to maintain the hierarchy that kept administrators like her in control. But she'd forgotten that hierarchies are only as strong as the people who respect them. And nobody here respected hers. Cole checked his phone. "Sarah Holland's been located. She's about 15 miles west, driving. Should I give her a message?" Morrison considered. "Tell her the Corps doesn't forget its debts, and neither do I." One of the helicopters lifted off, rotors churning the desert air, carrying Jace toward Phoenix. The other remained grounded, its crew securing equipment. Patricia's phone kept buzzing. She finally answered one of the calls, the board chairman. Patricia, what the hell is going on? I've got the Department of Health Services demanding access to all our emergency protocols, a state senator's office asking about wrongful termination, and social media is exploding with videos of Marines landing at our hospital. Explain. Now. She couldn't. The narrative she'd constructed so carefully, the story about a reckless nurse who'd finally gone too far, was being dismantled by reality caught on camera and witnessed by people who couldn't be intimidated or silenced. Cole Brennan walked back to his motorcycle, surrounded by his club members who'd stood silent witness to everything. As he mounted his bike, he pulled out his phone one more time. The message he sent was simple. Sarah, this is Cole Brennan. My nephew Jace says you saved his life. The Corps is handling the hospital. You're not alone in this. Call me. 15 miles west, Sarah Holland sat in her car at a roadside rest stop, staring at the desert and trying to figure out what came next. Her phone buzzed with the incoming text. She read it 3 times before the words actually made sense. Then she looked east toward Dalton Springs and saw the second helicopter rising into the sky, banking hard toward Phoenix, its military markings visible even from this distance. Sarah's finger hovered over the call button for 30 seconds before she pressed it. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, gravelly, calm, the kind of voice that had given orders in worse situations than this. Sarah Holland? Yes. Who is this? Cole Brennan, Jace's uncle, the kid you saved today. Sarah leaned back against her car, the metal hot through her shirt even as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. How did you get my number? Same way I got the Department of Health Services to open an investigation into your hospital. Same way I got a Marine colonel to fly 80 miles to pull my nephew out of that place. I made calls. A pause. You did good today, real good, but they're trying to bury you for it. I know. Then you also know it's not over. What Patricia Vance did, firing you, reporting you to the nursing board, that was just the opening move. She's going to spend the next week building a case that makes you look dangerous, reckless, a liability who finally went too far. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. She already started. State nursing board called me an hour ago. My license is under review. Yeah, we know. That's getting handled too. We? You saved a Marine's life, Sarah. That means something to people who remember what honor actually looks like. Colonel Morrison wants to meet you, so do about 40 bikers who watched the hospital staff let my nephew die while you were the only one willing to act. Sarah closed her eyes. The desert heat pressed against her skin, but she felt cold inside. I just want this to be over. It will be. But not until the people who tried to destroy you face what they did. Cole's voice softened slightly. Where are you right now? Rest stop off Highway 89, about 15 miles west of Dalton Springs. Stay there. I'm sending someone to you. Don't go home. Not yet. Patricia knows where you live, and she's got hospital security checking to make sure you're not stealing property or some other bullshit excuse to harass you further. This is insane. This is what happens when someone picks a fight with the wrong person and doesn't realize it until it's too late. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. Whether you want the help or not, you've got it. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the parking lot of a rest stop that consisted of 2 vending machines, 3 picnic tables, and a bathroom that probably hadn't been cleaned since the previous administration. The sun painted the desert in shades of amber and rust, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the faint rumble of engines. Within 20 minutes, a single motorcycle pulled into the rest stop. The rider was a woman in her early 40s, lean and weathered, with short dark hair and eyes that assessed Sarah in one quick glance before softening. She pulled off her helmet. I'm Rachel Torres. Cole sent me to make sure you're okay. I'm fine. You're standing in a rest stop parking lot at sunset looking like your world just ended. That's not fine. Rachel swung off her bike with practiced ease. You eaten today? Sarah couldn't remember. Breakfast, maybe. Nothing since. Come on. Rachel walked to one of the picnic tables and gestured. Sit, talk, or don't talk, but sit. Sarah found herself obeying, partly because she was tired, partly because Rachel had the kind of presence that made resistance feel pointless. They sat across from each other, the worn wooden table between them, and Rachel pulled a protein bar from her jacket and slid it across. I'm not hungry. Eat it anyway. You're about to walk into a shitstorm, and you need calories. Sarah unwrapped the bar mechanically and took a bite. Chocolate and something vaguely nutty. It tasted like cardboard, but her stomach woke up and demanded more. Rachel watched her eat half of it before speaking. I was a medic. Army, not Marines, but close enough. Did 3 tours in Iraq before an IED scrambled my spine enough that they sent me home with a Purple Heart and disability pay. She tapped her lower back. Still got shrapnel in there the surgeons couldn't get out. Moves around sometimes, hurts like hell. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew what I signed up for. Rachel leaned forward. You know what I didn't sign up for? Coming home and watching people die because administrators care more about covering their asses than saving lives. I've seen it. Hell, I've been on the receiving end of it. Military doctors who wouldn't prescribe pain meds because they were worried about being accused of creating addicts. Bureaucrats who'd rather let a veteran suffer than risk a lawsuit. Sarah finished the protein bar. Why are you telling me this? Because what happened to you today? That's personal to a lot of us. You didn't hesitate. You saw someone dying and you acted. That's rare. And the fact that they punished you for it makes every person who's ever been in a uniform want to burn that hospital to the ground. Rachel's eyes were hard. Cole's nephew is alive because you did your job. We're going to make sure everyone knows that. The nursing board already has their narrative. Patricia gave them a report that probably makes me sound like I'm one bad day away from losing my license anyway. Reports can be challenged, especially when they're full of lies. Rachel pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. You know Crestview Regional has security cameras everywhere, right? Parking lot, ER entrance, hallways, all of it? Yes. And you know that footage is legally protected once an investigation starts? Has to be preserved, can't be deleted or edited? Sarah's pulse quickened. The Department of Health Services investigation. Got triggered about 2 hours ago, which means every second of video showing you saving Jace while Dr. Whitfield and Patricia Savant stood there doing nothing is now evidence, protected evidence. Rachel smiled. Patricia probably hasn't realized that yet. She's too busy trying to control the narrative to understand the narrative is already gone. How did Cole do this? Get a state investigation started in 2 hours? Cole knows people, a lot of people. Some from his Marine days, some from running the club, some from 30 years of building relationships with folks who remember favors. He called in every one of them today. Rachel stood. You ready to see what that looks like? See what? The people who've got your back. Come on, ride with me. Sarah hesitated. Getting on a motorcycle with a stranger and heading into whatever Cole Brennan had orchestrated felt insane. But staying here, alone, waiting for the next administrative axe to fall felt worse. She stood. I've never been on a motorcycle. First time for everything. Hold on tight and lean when I lean. Rachel handed her a spare helmet, and Sarah climbed onto the back of the bike, feeling ridiculous and terrified and strangely exhilarated. The engine roared to life, and then they were moving, wind tearing at her clothes as the desert blurred past. They rode east, back toward Dalton Springs, but instead of heading to the hospital, Rachel took a turnoff that led to an industrial area on the edge of town. Warehouses and repair shops, most of them closed for the day, except one. The sign read Brennan Brothers Automotive. The parking lot was full of motorcycles arranged in neat rows, and through the open bay doors, Sarah could see people gathered inside, dozens of them, sitting on workbenches and standing in groups, all watching as Rachel's bike pulled in. Cole Brennan stood at the center talking to Colonel Morrison, who'd apparently traded his dress uniform for fatigues but still radiated authority. When Sarah dismounted and pulled off the helmet, every conversation stopped. Cole walked over. In person, he was even more imposing than his voice suggested. 6'2", built like someone who'd spent years working with his hands, with scars on his knuckles, and a presence that made people instinctively step back. Sarah Holland, he said, extending a hand. Thank you for saving my nephew's life. She shook it. His grip was firm but not aggressive. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. Not according to Patricia Vance. Patricia Vance is wrong. Yeah, she is, and by tomorrow morning everyone's going to know it. Cole gestured toward the gathered crowd. These are the people who showed up at the hospital. Most of them rode from Prescott with me. Some came from farther. All of them are here because they give a damn about what happened to you. Colonel Morrison approached, and Sarah found herself automatically straightening under his gaze. Ms. Holland, he said, his voice formal but not cold. I reviewed the security footage from Crestview Regional's parking lot. What I saw was a textbook emergency medical response performed under extreme time pressure by someone who clearly knew exactly what she was doing. Corporal Brennan is alive because you acted while others hesitated. The Marine Corps owes you a debt. I don't want anything, Sarah said quietly. I just want my career back. You'll get it, and the people who took it from you will face consequences. Morrison pulled out a tablet and turned it toward her. On the screen was the parking lot footage, time-stamped 3:47 p.m. Sarah watched herself drop beside Jace, assess him in seconds, call for help that didn't come. She watched Patricia emerge from the hospital and order her to stop, watched herself inject the epinephrine anyway, watched Jace's chest jerk as air flooded back into his lungs, watched Marcus Whitfield finally approach with a stethoscope, a full 90 seconds after Sarah had already saved Jace's life. How many people have seen this? Sarah asked. Right now, maybe a dozen. By tomorrow, everyone. Morrison swiped to another screen showing an email chain. The Department of Health Services has already requested complete access to all security footage, medical records, and administrative communications related to today's incident. Patricia Vance's report to the nursing board? It's about to get shredded by video evidence. A younger Marine appeared beside Morrison, barely 25, wearing corporal stripes. Colonel, we've got confirmation from Phoenix. Brennan's stable, receiving treatment at the VA center. Doctor there reviewed the incident and wants to speak with Ms. Holland. Sarah blinked. Why? Because he wants to offer you a job, Morrison said simply. The words hung in the air like something from an alternate reality. I'm sorry, what? Dr. James Keating, Chief of Emergency Medicine at Phoenix FAV Medical Center. He reviewed what happened today and decided that anyone willing to save a patient in a parking lot while hospital staff debated protocols is exactly the kind of nurse he needs. He's authorized to offer you a position starting immediately, pending resolution of the nursing board review, which, based on the evidence we're about to submit, should take about 48 hours. Sarah's legs felt weak. This is happening too fast. That's because you're used to hospital administration speed, where everything takes weeks and gets buried in committees, Cole said. This is military speed. This is what happens when people who actually give a damn decide to fix something. Rachel appeared with a bottle of water and pressed it into Sarah's hand. Breathe, drink, process. Sarah drank, the cold water cutting through the surreal fog that had settled over her thoughts. Around her, the people who'd ridden to Dalton Springs to support a nurse they'd never met were watching with expressions ranging from approval to fierce satisfaction. Why are you all doing this? Sarah asked quietly. A man in his 60s with a Vietnam veteran patch on his jacket answered. Because we've all been where you are. Different circumstances, same bullshit. Someone with power decides you're expendable, and they throw you away like trash. But you're not trash. You're a hero who got punished for doing the right thing, and that ends today. Another rider, a woman with arms covered in tattoos and a face weathered by decades in the sun, added, My daughter's in nursing school. I want her to know that when she does the right thing, people will back her up, not throw her to the wolves. Cole's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Patricia Vance just sent an email to the Crestview Regional Board of Directors, marked urgent. Morrison leaned over to read. His jaw tightened. She's requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to address security concerns following today's unauthorized military presence on hospital property. She's trying to flip this, make us the problem instead of her. Let me see, Sarah said. Cole handed her the phone. She read Patricia's email, watching the hospital director spin the day's events into a narrative about external intimidation, inappropriate interference by military personnel, and the need to protect hospital autonomy from outside pressure. Not one word about Jace nearly dying, not one mention of the epinephrine that saved him. Sarah handed the phone back. She's going to claim I coordinated all of this, that I called you to harass the hospital after I was fired. That's exactly what she's going to claim, Morrison agreed. It's the only play she has left. If she admits what really happened, she admits negligence. So she'll try to make this about everything except the facts. Will it work? Not if we get ahead of it. Morrison looked at Cole. How fast can your media contacts move? Cole smiled. I've got a reporter from Phoenix News Channel 7 who's been calling me for the last hour. She's ready to go live tonight if we give her the story. Give it to her. Full video, full context. Let Patricia try to spin this after the public sees what actually happened. Wait, Sarah interrupted. If you release that footage, my face is going to be all over the news. Everyone will know who I am. They already know who you are, Rachel said gently. Patricia made sure of that when she reported you to the nursing board. The story's getting out either way. Question is whether you control the narrative or she does. Sarah thought about her daughter, about to see her mother on television getting fired for saving someone's life. Thought about every nurse who'd ever been punished for caring too much, moving too fast, refusing to let policy override humanity. Do it, she said. Cole made the call. 20 minutes later, a news van pulled into the parking lot. A reporter in her 30s emerged with a cameraman, and Sarah found herself sitting under harsh portable lights, telling her story while Colonel Morrison and Cole stood just off camera, silent witnesses to testimony that would destroy Patricia Vance's carefully constructed lies. I saw a young man collapsing in the parking lot, Sarah said, looking directly into the camera. He was in anaphylactic shock. His airway was closing. He had minutes, maybe less. I called for help. The hospital director ordered me to stop. The attending physician hesitated, citing protocols. So I made a choice. I saved his life. The reporter leaned forward. And then I was fired, escorted out by security, reported to the state nursing board. My license is under review. I'm being professionally destroyed for doing exactly what I was trained to do, save a patient who was dying. Do you regret your actions? Sarah didn't hesitate. No. I regret that I worked, in a system where saving a life is considered grounds for termination. But I don't regret saving Jace Brennan. I'd do it again. The interview lasted 15 minutes. The reporter got additional statements from Morrison, from Cole, from several of the bikers who'd witnessed the hospital's response. They recorded everything, and by the time they packed up their equipment, Sarah could see the reporter's expression, the barely contained excitement of someone who knew they had a story that would explode. This goes live at 10 p.m., the reporter said. After that, you're going to get a lot of attention. You ready for that? Sarah wasn't sure, but she nodded anyway. The news van left, and the crowd in the garage began to thin as people headed home or to wherever they were staying for the night. Rachel offered Sarah a ride to a motel on the edge of town, away from the hospital and Patricia's reach. You shouldn't be alone tonight, Rachel said. Things are about to get wild. She was right. At 10:03 p.m., Phoenix News Channel 7 led with the story. Nurse fired for saving Marine's life ran across the screen in bold letters, followed by footage of Sarah's interview, the parking lot video, and Jace being loaded into the helicopter. By 10:15 p.m., it had been picked up by 3 other local stations. By 10:30 p.m., it was trending on social media. By 11 p.m., national news outlets were calling. Sarah watched from her motel room as her face appeared on television screens across Arizona and beyond. She watched Patricia Vance's carefully constructed narrative disintegrate under the weight of video evidence and public outrage. She watched as comments flooded in, thousands of them, from nurses sharing their own stories of being punished for caring, from veterans furious that a Marine had nearly been abandoned, from ordinary people who'd had enough of systems that valued procedure over people. Her phone rang constantly. News outlets, supporters, interview requests. She stopped answering after the 20th call. At midnight, Jessica called from California. Mom, what the hell is happening? You're all over the news. I saved a patient, got fired, and now apparently the world knows about it. Mom, they're calling you a hero. I'm a nurse who did her job. That's not what the comments say. That's not what any of this says. Jessica's voice cracked slightly. I'm so proud of you and so angry that they tried to destroy you for it. Sarah closed her eyes, letting her daughter's words wash over her. It's not over yet, honey. Patricia's going to fight back. She has to. Let her try. Have you seen the hospital's Facebook page? It's getting hammered. People are calling for boycotts, for investigations, for her resignation. The board meeting tomorrow, the one she called, is about to become a nightmare for her, not you. After they hung up, Sarah lay in the dark motel room and tried to process the whiplash of the past 10 hours. This morning, she'd been a nurse. By afternoon, she was fired and professionally ruined. By midnight, she was a national news story and the face of a movement she hadn't asked to lead. She fell asleep sometime after 2 a.m., her phone still buzzing with messages she'd never read. At Crestview Regional Medical Center, Patricia Vance wasn't sleeping either. She sat in her office watching the news coverage, watching her career collapse in real time. The hospital's main phone line had been ringing nonstop since the story broke. The board chairman had called twice, each time more furious than the last. 3 board members had already sent emails demanding her immediate suspension. Dr. Marcus Whitfield sat across from her, pale and shaking. "This is bad. This is really bad." "It's manageable," Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We stick to the facts." She violated protocol. We had grounds for termination. "Patricia, there's video of you ordering her to let a patient die." "I never said that." "You told her to step away from a patient in active anaphylaxis. That's the same thing." Marcus stood, pacing. "I should have moved faster. I should have grabbed the epinephrine myself. But you were there, and you said wait for assessment, and You followed protocol. Protocol nearly killed him, and now everyone knows it. The Marines know it. The media knows it. The whole damn country knows it." He turned toward her. "I'm done protecting you. Tomorrow at that board meeting, I'm telling the truth. If you do that, you'll be admitting negligence. They'll come after your license." "They're already coming after my license. The Department of Health Services investigation includes my actions, or lack of them." Marcus's hand shook. "I became a doctor to help people. What I did today, what I didn't do, that's not who I want to be." He left, and Patricia sat alone in her office, surrounded by the career she'd built over 2 decades. Hospital administrator, respected professional, someone who'd climbed the ranks by being decisive, by maintaining control, by never letting emotion override policy. And now it was all crumbling because one nurse had refused to follow orders. Patricia opened her laptop and started drafting her defense for the morning board meeting. She would argue that the military presence constituted intimidation, that Sarah Holland had coordinated a harassment campaign, that the hospital had acted appropriately given the information available at the time. She would argue all of it. And maybe, if she was convincing enough, she could salvage something from this disaster. But deep down, watching the news coverage loop for the 100th time, watching Sarah's calm, steady testimony about choosing life over policy, Patricia knew the truth. She had already lost. The morning sun hit Dalton Springs like a hammer at 6:47 a.m., and Sarah woke to discover she'd received over 300 messages overnight. She scrolled through them, interview requests from Good Morning America, CNN, Fox News, NPR, and a dozen podcasts. Messages from nurses across the country sharing their own stories. Threats from people who thought she was undermining hospital authority. Support from strangers who'd never met her, but believed she deserved better. And one message from Dr. James Keating at Phoenix Phi Medical Center. "Offer stands. Doors open whenever you're ready." Rachel knocked on her motel room door at 7:30 with coffee and breakfast burritos from a local shop. "Board meeting's at 9. Cole wants to know if you want to be there." "I was fired. I'm not allowed on hospital property." "You're also the subject of a major story that's getting national attention. Patricia can either let you attend as a concerned citizen, or she can have security throw out the woman who saved a Marine while cameras record the whole thing. Your call." Sarah drank her coffee and considered. Walking into that boardroom meant facing Patricia, Marcus, and every administrator who'd stood by while she was destroyed. It meant confrontation, public scrutiny, vulnerability, but it also meant not hiding, not letting them control the narrative while she stayed safely out of sight. "I'll go," she said. They arrived at Crestview Regional at 8:45 a.m. The parking lot was already packed, not just with hospital staff, but with news vans, protesters holding signs supporting Sarah, and a small group of counter-protesters arguing that she should have followed protocols. Cole and 24 of his riders formed a protective corridor from the parking lot to the entrance. Security tried to stop Sarah at the door. "She's trespassing," the guard said. "Ms. Vance was clear." "Ms. Vance doesn't make the rules anymore," Cole said quietly. And if you try to remove a woman who's here to witness a public board meeting, those cameras over there will make sure everyone knows about it." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the hospital felt different. Staff members who'd watched her get fired yesterday now approached with quiet apologies, with whispered support, with shame in their eyes. Sarah acknowledged them with nods, but didn't stop moving. The boardroom was on the second floor, and by the time she arrived, it was standing room only. Board members sat at the long table at the front, looking uncomfortable. Patricia stood near a podium, her suit immaculate, her expression controlled. Marcus sat in the corner, looking like he hadn't slept. Sarah entered with Cole and Rachel flanking her. Every head turned. Patricia's face went white, then red. "She can't be here. She's terminated. This is a closed session." The board chairman, a silver-haired man in his 70s named Howard Garrett, held up a hand. "Actually, Ms. Vance, this is an open session. You called it as a public board meeting, which means any member of the public can attend, including Ms. Holland." "I object." "Objection noted. Sit down, Patricia." Sarah found a seat in the back row, directly in Patricia's line of sight. The hospital director had no choice but to proceed. "This meeting was called to address serious concerns regarding yesterday's events," Patricia began, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her. "Specifically, the unauthorized military presence on hospital property, the removal of a patient without proper transfer protocols, and the coordination of what appears to be an organized harassment campaign against this institution." "Are you talking about the part where Marines saved a patient your staff nearly killed?" someone shouted from the crowd. Howard gavelled for order. "Please continue, Ms. Vance." Patricia clicked to a presentation slide showing the parking lot full of motorcycles. "This represents an unacceptable level of external intimidation. Hospital administrators must be free to make decisions without fear of—" The boardroom door opened. Colonel Morrison walked in, still in fatigues, followed by two other Marines in dress uniforms. Behind them came a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase, someone Sarah didn't recognize but who radiated authority. Patricia stopped mid-sentence. "I apologize for the interruption," Morrison said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "But I believe this board should have all relevant information before making any decisions. May I address the assembly?" Howard looked at Patricia, who seemed incapable of speech, then nodded. "Please proceed, Colonel." Morrison walked to the front of the room. "I'm Colonel Richard Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Yesterday, Corporal Jace Brennan, one of my Marines, nearly died in your parking lot from anaphylactic shock. Hospital security footage shows him collapsing at 3:47 p.m. It shows Ms. Sarah Holland immediately responding. It shows her calling for help. And it shows your hospital director ordering her to step away from a dying patient while your chief of emergency medicine stood by and did nothing for 90 seconds. He pulled out a tablet and connected it to the boardroom's display screen. The parking lot footage played in high definition, every detail crystal clear. The room watched in silence as Sarah saved Jace's life, watched as Patricia fired her for it. When it ended, Morrison continued, "The woman you terminated yesterday is the only reason Corporal Brennan is alive. The administrators who fired her nearly cost a Marine his life through negligence and bureaucratic cowardice. And now this institution wants to claim that military personnel responding to that negligence constitutes harassment?" He shook his head. "Respectfully, Chairman Garrett, that's an insult to everyone who's ever worn a uniform." The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. "I'm Diana Reeves, Assistant Director of the Arizona Department of Health Services. Our investigation into Crestview Regional's emergency protocols began yesterday and has already uncovered multiple violations of state medical standards. This meeting is now part of that investigation, and everything said here is on the record." Patricia's carefully constructed defense evaporated. She looked at the board members seeking support and found only closed expressions and averted eyes. Howard Garrett stood. "Ms. Vance, you're suspended effective immediately pending the outcome of the state investigation. Dr. Whitfield, the same applies to you. This board will convene in closed session to discuss next steps, but I think I speak for all of us when I say that what we've seen today is unacceptable." He turned to Sarah. "Ms. Holland, on behalf of this board, I apologize. What happened to you was wrong. We will work with the state nursing board to clear your record and restore your license immediately." Patricia finally found her voice. "You can't do this. I followed protocol. I protected this hospital from liability." "You almost killed a patient," Howard said flatly. and you destroyed a nurse's career to cover it up. You're done here, Patricia. Security approached, not to escort Sarah out, but to escort Patricia Vance from the boardroom she'd ruled over for 5 years. She left with her head high, but Sarah could see the truth in her eyes. She knew it was over. The silence that followed Patricia's exit lasted exactly 4 seconds before the boardroom erupted into controlled chaos. Board members conferring in urgent whispers, Diana Reeves making notes on her tablet, reporters outside pressing against the glass doors trying to capture footage. Sarah remained seated, watching it all unfold with the strange detachment of someone observing their own vindication from a distance. Victory felt different than she'd imagined. Colder, more hollow. Cole leaned close. "You good?" "Ask me in a week." Howard Garrett gavelled for order again, but his authority had fractured. The board members looked shaken, some angry, others clearly calculating how much liability they'd personally inherited from Patricia's decisions. One woman, mid-50s, wearing pearls and carrying herself like old money, stood abruptly. "Mr. Chairman, I move for immediate termination of both Ms. Vance and Dr. Whitfield, effective immediately, with cause." No severance, no recommendations, complete severance of all ties to this institution. "Second," another board member called. "All in favor?" 7 hands went up simultaneously. No discussion, no debate. Motion carries. Howard's face was grim. "Ms. Reeves, the board will cooperate fully with your investigation. We'll provide complete access to all records, personnel files, and security footage. Whatever you need." Diana Reeves nodded. "I'll need interviews with nursing staff, particularly anyone who witnessed yesterday's events or has experienced similar pressure to delay emergency care. We'll also be reviewing all terminations in the past 18 months to identify patterns of retaliation against medical personnel." A younger board member, barely 40 with nervous energy radiating from him, spoke up. "What about Ms. Holland's reinstatement?" "That's not up to us," Howard said. "Her termination stands until the nursing board clears her license, which, given this evidence, should happen quickly, but we can't override state regulations." Morrison stepped forward again. "Then perhaps the board would consider a formal statement supporting Ms. Holland's license reinstatement. The nursing board will move faster if Crestview Regional publicly admits its mistake and requests her credentials be restored immediately." The silence that followed was loaded with calculation. Supporting Sarah meant admitting institutional failure. It meant liability, potential lawsuits, public relations nightmares. But not supporting her after everything the cameras had just recorded meant something worse. Howard looked at his fellow board members, reading the room with practiced ease. "I'll draft the statement personally. It'll go out this afternoon." Diana Reeves closed her briefcase with a sharp click. "One more thing. I'll need Ms. Holland's testimony as part of the investigation. Miss Holland, would you be willing to provide a formal statement?" Every eye in the room turned to Sarah. She stood slowly. "Yes." "Good. My office will contact you within 24 hours to schedule." Diana paused, then added, "For what it's worth, what you did yesterday took courage. The system failed you. We're going to make sure it doesn't fail anyone else the same way." She left, trailed by her assistants, leaving behind a boardroom full of people who just watched their hospital's reputation crater in real time. Morrison approached Sarah. "Ms. Holland, a word." They stepped into the hallway, away from the crowd and cameras. The colonel's bearing remained military precise, but something in his expression softened slightly. "Corporal Brennan wants to thank you personally. He's being released from Phoenix 5A this afternoon. Would you be willing to meet him?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Is he okay?" "Full recovery, no complications. The VA doctor said another 2 minutes without treatment, and he'd have suffered brain damage from oxygen deprivation. Another 5 and he'd be dead." Morrison's jaw set. "You gave him his life back, Ms. Holland. He wants you to know that." "I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing what the people paid to do their jobs refused to do. There's a difference." He pulled out a card and handed it to her. "That's the VA Center's address. Brennan will be there until 4 p.m. If you can make it, he'd appreciate it. So would I." Sarah took the card. Phoenix was 90 miles away, 2 hours round trip through desert highway. She had no job, no schedule, No reason not to go except exhaustion and the overwhelming desire to hide from the attention that was only going to intensify. "I'll be there," she said. Morrison nodded, saluted crisply, and walked back toward his Marines. Cole appeared at Sarah's elbow. "You need a ride to Phoenix? I have my car. You also have about 20 reporters waiting outside who are going to follow you the second you leave. Rachel and I can run interference, but you're going to need an exit strategy." He wasn't wrong. Through the windows, Sarah could see the news crews multiplying, cameras trained on every exit. Her face was already national news. Leaving the hospital would trigger a feeding frenzy. Rachel joined them, phone in hand. "Just got word from the local PD. They're sending 2 patrol cars to escort you out if you want it. Apparently the chief saw the news last night and is very interested in making sure the nurse who saved a Marine doesn't get harassed by media." "That's not necessary." "Sarah," Cole interrupted gently, "you're about to become the most famous nurse in America. Whether you want it or not, you're the face of this story now. Take the help while it's offered." 20 minutes later, Sarah walked out of Crestview Regional Medical Center flanked by Cole and Rachel, with 2 police cruisers providing escort and a wall of bikers creating a corridor through the press. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones thrust toward her face. "Ms. Holland, how does it feel to be vindicated? Will you sue the hospital? What's your message to other nurses facing retaliation?" Sarah kept walking, eyes forward, until she reached her car. Cole opened the door for her and she slid inside, hands shaking slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The police escort led her out of the parking lot and onto the highway, lights flashing but no sirens. Behind them, several news vans tried to follow, but the bikers boxed them out with practiced precision, creating space for Sarah to drive. She made it 5 miles before the shaking got worse. Sarah pulled into another rest stop, different from yesterday's, this one with an actual visitor center and clean bathrooms. She sat in her car with the engine off, breathing carefully, trying to calm the adrenaline crash that was hitting her system like a delayed earthquake. Her phone rang. Jessica again. "Mom, oh my God, I just saw the board meeting footage. It's everywhere. You destroyed them." "I didn't destroy anyone. They destroyed themselves." "Same result. Patricia Vance is done. Dr. Whitfield is done. The hospital is scrambling, and you're—" Jessica paused. "Are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine, just processing." "Where are you?" "Driving to Phoenix. The Marine I saved wants to meet me." "That's good. That's really good. Mom, listen. My advisor saw the news and asked if you'd be interested in speaking at a healthcare policy conference next month. It's a big deal. Lots of administrators and medical school faculty. They want to hear from frontline workers about institutional failures." Sarah closed her eyes. "Honey, I appreciate it, but I'm not a speaker. I'm a nurse." "You're a nurse who just exposed how broken the system is. People need to hear from you. Let me get through today first." They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and Sarah sat in the quiet car watching tourists flow in and out of the visitor center, families on road trips, retirees exploring the Southwest, normal people living normal lives while hers spun into something unrecognizable. She started the car and drove. Phoenix 5, a medical center, rose from the desert like a monument to military medicine. 6 stories of steel and glass, surrounded by parking lots and desert landscaping designed to survive with minimal water. Sarah arrived at 2:30 p.m., parked, and sat for a full minute before forcing herself to move. Inside, the air conditioning hit like a wall of ice. The reception desk directed her to the 4th floor, where Jace Brennan was finishing his discharge paperwork. She took the elevator up, emerged into a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and floor wax, and found room 412. The door was open. Jace sat on the edge of the hospital bed, dressed in Marine Corps PT gear, looking impossibly young despite everything he'd survived. His face was clear, no swelling, no hives. An IV port was still taped to his arm, but he was alert and whole. He looked up as Sarah appeared in the doorway, and his entire face transformed. "You're here," he said, standing quickly. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm alive because of you." He gestured at himself. "All of this, breathing, standing, being able to go back to my unit, that's because you didn't wait for permission. The doctors here told me I had maybe 3 minutes left when you hit me with the epinephrine. Said any longer and I'd have coded right there in the parking lot." Sarah stepped into the room. I'm glad you're okay. Okay doesn't cover it. I should be dead or brain damaged. Instead, I'm walking out of here today because you gave a damn when nobody else would. Jace's voice cracked slightly. My uncle told me what they did to you, that you got fired, reported, destroyed for saving me. That's not right. That's not even close to right. It's being handled. Yeah, I heard. Uncle Cole doesn't do anything small. Jace smiled, but it was strained. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you'd followed their orders, if you just stepped away and waited for the doctors to figure out their protocols. I'd be dead, and nobody would have been held accountable because they were following procedure. But that didn't happen, because you wouldn't let it happen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a challenge coin, military tradition, a token given to recognize exceptional service. This belonged to my platoon sergeant. He gave it to me after my first deployment, told me to pass it on to someone who earned it, someone who embodied what being a Marine actually means, doing the hard right thing when everyone else takes the easy wrong path. He held it out. Sarah stared at the coin, heavy and worn, inscribed with Marine Corps insignia and a motto she couldn't quite read from this distance. I can't take that. You already did, the second you chose my life over their policies. Jace pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it. Thank you doesn't cover what you did. This doesn't either, but it's what I've got. The metal was warm from his pocket, solid and real in a way that cut through all the surreal chaos of the past 30 hours. Sarah looked at this young Marine who'd nearly died 10 feet from an emergency room because administrators valued control over compassion, and something in her chest cracked open. You're welcome, she whispered. A knock at the door. Dr. James Keating entered, late 50s, graying hair, wearing scrubs with a VA Medical Center badge clipped to his chest. He had the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in emergency medicine and hadn't lost his soul to it. Ms. Holland, he said, extending a hand. I'm glad you made it. Jace has been talking about you nonstop since we admitted him. Sarah shook his hand. Thank you for taking care of him. That's my job. Unlike some people, I remember what that means. Keating glanced at Jace. You're cleared for discharge. Your CO will have someone pick you up at 1600 hours. Try not to get stung by anything else for the foreseeable future. Jace grinned. Yes, sir. Keating turned back to Sarah. Can we talk? My office is down the hall. They left Jace finishing his paperwork and walked to an office that was organized chaos. Medical journals stacked on every surface, a whiteboard covered in schedules and protocols, photos of Keating with various military personnel and medical teams spanning decades. He closed the door and gestured to a chair. I meant what I said yesterday, Keating began, sitting behind his desk. The job offer is real. We need trauma nurses who know how to make decisions under pressure, who don't freeze when protocols don't cover the situation, who actually give a damn about the patients more than the liability. My license is still under review. It won't be for long. I've already spoken with colleagues at the State Nursing Board. Once they see the evidence from Crestview Regional, your suspension will be lifted, probably within 48 hours. He leaned forward. I need someone like you here, Sarah. Not just because you're competent. I can find competent nurses. I need someone who proved they'll do the right thing even when it costs them everything. Sarah looked at the photos on his wall. Young soldiers, Marines, airmen. Some injured, some whole, all alive because of the work done in facilities like this one. I've worked civilian hospitals my entire career. Then you know how bad it can get, how administrators who've never touched a patient make decisions that get people killed, how policies designed to reduce liability end up increasing casualties, how nurses get thrown to the wolves for caring too much. Keating's expression hardened. The VA isn't perfect. We've got our own bureaucracy, our own problems. But we also have a clear mission. Take care of the people who served. That mission doesn't get overridden by a hospital director worried about bad press. What happened at Crestview wasn't normal. You sure about that? How many times have you seen doctors hesitate because they're worried about lawsuits? How many times have administrators prioritized image over outcomes? How many nurses have been written up for acting too quickly, for bypassing chains of command, for saving lives in ways that made management uncomfortable? Sarah didn't answer because she couldn't. Every hospital she'd worked in had stories. Nurses disciplined for going around slow doctors, for calling codes before getting authorization, for doing what needed to be done while someone higher up the food chain debated protocols. "You know I'm right," Keating said quietly. "What happened to you was extreme. But the underlying dynamic isn't. You just had the bad luck to cross a particularly vindictive administrator in front of cameras. And now I'm the face of a movement I didn't ask to lead. Nobody asks for that, but you've got a choice now. Hide from the attention and hope it goes away, or use it to actually change something. Come work here. Train the next generation of VA nurses. Show them what right looks like. Turn this disaster into something meaningful." Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. A text from Diana Reeves. Nursing Board received Crestview's statement supporting full reinstatement. Expedited review approved. Expect decision Monday morning. 3 days. Her entire career hanging in limbo for 3 more days. "I need time to think," Sarah said. "Take it. But don't take too long. The offer expires when someone else accepts it." Sarah left his office and found Jace waiting in the hallway, discharge papers in hand, looking stronger than he had 24 hours ago. They walked to the elevator together, rode down in silence, emerged into the lobby where Cole Brennan stood waiting with 3 other riders. Cole saw Sarah and smiled. "Told you we'd make this right. It's not right yet. Patricia's suspended, not fired. Whitfield still has his medical license. The investigation is just starting. Give it time. Diana Reeves doesn't do surface-level investigations. She's already requested personnel files going back 5 years. By the time she's done, every administrator who covered for Patricia or pressured medical staff is going to face consequences. And what about the nurses who get fired next week at other hospitals? The ones who don't have a Marine's uncle to call in favors?" Cole's expression sobered. "That's the bigger fight. This was just the opening round." Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number again. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Holland, this is Andrew Vasquez from the Office of the Arizona Governor. Governor Martinez saw the news coverage and would like to speak with you about serving on a task force reviewing emergency medical protocols statewide. Would you be available for a call tomorrow?" Sarah leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "Can I call you back?" "Of course. I'll send my direct number via text." The line went dead. Cole was watching her. "What now?" "The governor wants me on a task force." "That's good." "Is it? 24 hours ago I was a nurse doing my job. Now I'm supposed to be a policy expert, a speaker, a face of healthcare reform. I didn't sign up for this." "No, you signed up to save lives, which you did. Everything else is people recognizing that you're worth listening to." Cole put a hand on her shoulder. "You can say no, walk away, take the VA job, live quiet. Nobody would blame you. But you've got a chance to actually fix the thing that almost destroyed you. How many people get that opportunity?" Sarah didn't have an answer. Jace stepped forward. "Whatever you decide, thank you for everything. I'll never forget what you did." He saluted, crisp, military, perfect, and Sarah found herself returning it despite never having served, the gesture feeling right in a way words couldn't capture. Cole's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression shifted. "You need to see this." He turned the screen toward her. A news alert. "Breaking. Crestview Regional Board. Votes to terminate hospital director, chief of emergency medicine. Full investigation underway." Below it, another alert. Nurse Sarah Holland to receive State Nursing Board commendation for life-saving actions. And below that, National Nurses United calls for federal investigation into retaliation against healthcare workers. The story was expanding, metastasizing beyond Dalton Springs into something bigger. Sarah's face was already appearing on magazine covers visible on the newsstand across the lobby. Her name was trending on social media platforms she'd never used. Rachel appeared from somewhere with coffee. "Drink this. You look like you're about to pass out." Sarah took the coffee mechanically. "This is insane." "This is what happens when the right story hits at the right time," Rachel said. "Every nurse in America who's ever been punished for caring too much is watching you right now. You're their proof that fighting back is possible." "I didn't fight back. I just saved a patient." "Same thing. You chose the patient over the system. The system tried to destroy you, and now the system is losing." Rachel's eyes were fierce. "Don't diminish what you did. Don't let anyone tell you this was small or simple. You changed the conversation about what healthcare workers are allowed to do when administrators fail." Sarah drank the coffee, too hot, too bitter, but grounding her in the physical reality of this moment. She was standing in a VA hospital lobby, surrounded by Marines and bikers, and people who'd decided she mattered, while her career simultaneously collapsed and rebuilt itself into something completely different. Her phone buzzed again. Jessica. "Mom, NBC wants you for an interview, national coverage. Should I tell them yes?" Before Sarah could respond, another text came through, this one from Howard Garrett. "Ms. Holland, the board would like to formally offer you a position as Director of Emergency Services Oversight at Crestview Regional, effective immediately upon license reinstatement. We need someone who remembers what patient care actually means." Sarah stared at the message until the words stopped making sense. They wanted her back, not as a nurse, as the person in charge of the department that had just destroyed her. The people who'd escorted her out carrying a cardboard box now wanted her to run emergency services. "Sarah?" Cole's voice cut through her mental static. "You okay?" "Crestview just offered me a director position." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Rachel laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "Are they serious?" "Apparently." "What are you going to tell them?" Sarah looked at her phone, at the messages piling up faster than she could read them, at the opportunities and demands and expectations accumulating like snow in an avalanche. Governor's task force, NBC interview, VA position, hospital director role, speaking engagements, policy consulting. Everyone wanted a piece of the nurse who'd said no to authority and survived. "I don't know," she admitted. Cole's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. "That was Diana Reeves. She needs you back in Dalton Springs tomorrow morning, early. Says she's got something you need to see before she releases her preliminary findings." "What findings?" She wouldn't say over the phone, but she sounded serious. Sarah checked the time, 3:45 p.m. If she left now, she'd be back in Dalton Springs by 6. She could sleep in her own bed tonight, wake up to whatever Diana Reeves had discovered, and try to make sense of a life that had detonated and reassembled in less than 48 hours. "I should go," she said. The drive back was quiet. Sarah took Highway 60 through desert that glowed gold in the late afternoon sun, mountains rising like ancient sentinels. She had the road mostly to herself, just her and the occasional semi-truck hauling goods across Arizona's endless expanses. Her mind drifted between thoughts, Jace's challenge coin heavy in her pocket, Patricia's face as security escorted her from the boardroom, Morrison's salute, Keating's job offer, the weight of expectation settling onto shoulders that had only ever wanted to do good work and go home. She stopped for gas in a small town whose name she didn't catch, and while the pump ran, she finally opened her social media apps. The notifications were overwhelming. Thousands of comments, shares, messages from people she'd never met, telling her she was a hero, an inspiration, proof that the system could be beaten. Nurses sharing their own stories of retaliation and fear. Patients thanking her for reminding them that some healthcare workers still cared. But mixed in were other messages. Accusations that she'd staged the whole thing for attention. Claims she'd violated patient privacy. Threats from people who believed questioning hospital authority was tantamount to medical terrorism. Sarah closed the apps and put her phone away. She made it home by 6:30. Her house was the same as she'd left it, small, neat, filled with furniture she'd picked carefully over years of living alone after her divorce. But walking through the door felt like entering a stranger's life. She dropped her bag, fed her cat Einstein, who'd been judging her from the back of the couch, and collapsed onto the sofa without bothering to change clothes. Sleep didn't come easy despite the exhaustion. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jace collapsing, Patricia's cold smile, the parking lot stretching endlessly before her. She saw alternate versions where she'd obeyed orders, where she'd stepped back and let protocols play out, where Jace died while lawyers debated liability. At midnight, she gave up and made tea, sat at her kitchen table drinking chamomile and reading the messages that kept arriving, job offers from hospitals across the country, interview requests from major publications, invitations to testify before healthcare committees. One message stood out. From a nurse in Seattle, "I was written up last year for calling a code before the attending arrived. Patient survived, but I got suspended for 3 days. Nobody cared. Nobody listened. Thank you for showing us we're not alone." Sarah read it 3 times, then finally responded, "You were never alone. The system just makes us feel that way." She slept from 2 a.m. to 5:30, woke before her alarm, and dressed for whatever Diana Reeves needed to show her. Professional, but comfortable. Slacks, blouse, sensible shoes. The same clothes she'd worn to thousands of shifts, but they felt different now. Like a uniform for a battle she hadn't known she was fighting. Diana had requested they meet at 7 a.m. at a location she'd provide via text. The message came through at 6:15. County Administrative Building, 3rd floor, Conference Room C. Come alone. Bring coffee. You'll need it. Sarah drove through Dalton Springs in the thin morning light, streets mostly empty except for early commuters and delivery trucks. The county building was downtown, a blocky concrete structure that housed various government offices. She found parking, grabbed the 2 coffees she'd picked up at a drive-thru, and rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. Conference Room C was at the end of the hall. Inside, Diana Reeves sat surrounded by file boxes and laptop screens, looking like she hadn't slept either. "Miss Holland, thanks for coming." Diana accepted a coffee gratefully. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room until I release my report. Understood?" "Yes." Diana pulled up a file on her laptop. "My team spent yesterday reviewing Crestview Regional's personnel records, incident reports, and termination files. We found a pattern." She turned the screen towards Sarah. The spreadsheet showed names, dates, departments. Sarah scanned the entries, her stomach sinking with each line. 15 nurses terminated in the past 3 years, all of them for protocol violations, all of them from emergency services or critical care, all of them within weeks of logging complaints about delayed care, inadequate staffing, or administrative interference in patient treatment. "Patricia Vance has been systematically removing nurses who question her authority," Diana said quietly. "You weren't the first. You were just the one who went viral." Sarah stared at the names. Some she recognized. Good nurses who'd left suddenly, their departures explained away as personal decisions or better opportunities elsewhere. Others were strangers, but she could imagine their stories, could see the pattern clearly now that someone had assembled the evidence. Does the board know? They're being briefed this morning, along with the State Medical Board, the Attorney General's Office, and the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. Diana's expression was grim. This isn't just administrative misconduct anymore. This is systematic retaliation against healthcare workers, pattern and practice. Possibly criminal. How many patients died because good nurses were fired? That's the question I'm going to spend the next month answering. But preliminary review of mortality rates in Crestview's emergency department shows a statistically significant increase over the past 3 years. Could be coincidence. Could be something much worse. Sarah's hands shook slightly. She killed people by removing the nurses who would have saved them. That's what the evidence suggests, but proving it requires correlating outcomes with staffing changes, reviewing individual cases, establishing causation. It's complicated. People died. Yes, and the person responsible is currently suspended with full pay, living in her house, planning her legal defense. Diana leaned forward. "That's why I needed you here early. Because when I release this report, the story explodes again. Bigger than before. National attention, federal investigation, criminal charges potentially. And you're going to be at the center of it whether you want to be or not." Sarah's coffee had gone cold in her hands. She set it down carefully. "What do you need from me?" "Testimony? Detailed statement about your experiences at Crestview, not just yesterday, but everything you've observed over 14 years. Other nurses who were fired. Which ones do you remember? What were their complaints? Who else might have witnessed the pattern? You want me to help build a criminal case against my former employer. I want you to help make sure this never happens to another nurse. That what happened to you and to 15 others results in actual systemic change instead of just headlines that fade in a week." Through the conference room window, Sarah could see Dalton Springs waking up. Office workers heading to their jobs, students walking to school, normal people living normal lives while she sat in a government building reviewing evidence of institutional murder. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Vance. We need to talk. Meet me at Desert Bloom Cafe at 9 a.m. Come alone. This is your chance to make this go away quietly." Sarah showed the message to Diana. The investigator's expression went cold. "She's trying to cut a deal. Probably wants to offer you money, reinstatement, whatever it takes to get you to stop cooperating with our investigation. Should I go?" "Legally, I can't tell you not to. Personally, I think she's desperate and dangerous. If you do go, record everything. Arizona is a one-party consent state. You can legally record conversations you're part of without informing the other party." Sarah looked at the message again. Patricia Vance, the woman who destroyed her career to cover administrative incompetence, now wanted to meet privately, wanted to make this go away quietly. Everything in Sarah's training said avoid confrontation, let the system handle it, trust the investigation to deliver justice. But everything in this past 48 hours had proven the system only worked when someone forced it to. "I'll go," Sarah said, "but I want a wire, or whatever the modern equivalent is." Diana smiled, sharp and satisfied. "I can arrange that." The recording device was smaller than Sarah expected, barely larger than a button, clipped to the inside of her collar, with adhesive backing that felt medical grade. Diana's technical specialist, a quiet woman named Lynn Park, who worked for the state attorney general's office, tested the audio 3 times before nodding approval. "Clear signal, no distortion. It'll capture everything within 15 feet. Lynn handed Sarah a phone that looked identical to her own, but wasn't. "This is connected to the recorder. Keep it on the table during the meeting, acts as a backup, and lets us monitor in real time. You'll be listening? From a vehicle 2 blocks away. If anything feels dangerous, say the word protocol, and we'll have officers there in under 90 seconds. Lynn's expression was serious. Patricia Vance is cornered. Cornered people do unpredictable things. Don't assume she won't escalate. Sarah checked her watch. 8:17 a.m. Desert Bloom Cafe was a 10-minute drive, a locally owned place known for overpriced lattes and breakfast sandwiches that tasted like cardboard wrapped in good intentions. She'd been there maybe twice in 14 years. Diana walked her to the parking garage. Remember, let her talk. Don't volunteer information. If she offers you anything, get specifics. Dollar amounts, timelines, exactly what she wants in exchange. You think she'll try to bribe me? I think she's facing criminal charges and prison time. People in that position get creative. Diana paused at Sarah's car. You don't have to do this. We have enough evidence without whatever she might say today. But more evidence helps. It does. But your safety matters more than building a stronger case. Sarah opened her car door. She already tried to destroy my career. What else can she do? That's what worries me. The drive to Desert Bloom took 12 minutes through morning traffic that was heavier than Sarah anticipated. She parked in the public lot behind the cafe, sat for 30 seconds gathering herself, then walked inside with the phone that wasn't a phone in her hand. Patricia Vance sat in a corner booth, partially concealed by a decorative wooden divider, dressed in civilian clothes that looked expensive but deliberately understated. No power suit today, just slacks and a blouse that might have been designed to make her look vulnerable. Sympathetic. Her eyes tracked Sarah from the moment she entered. Sarah ordered coffee at the counter, something to do with her hands, then walked to the booth and slid into the opposite seat. Set the phone face down on the table between them. Thank you for coming, Patricia said. Her voice was softer than Sarah remembered, almost gentle. I wasn't sure you would. You said you wanted to talk. I want to apologize. Patricia folded her hands on the table, and Sarah noticed they were shaking slightly. What happened Thursday was wrong. I reacted poorly under pressure, made decisions I regret, and caused you significant harm. I'm sorry. Sarah waited. I've been in hospital administration for 23 years, Patricia continued. I've made thousands of decisions, managed hundreds of crises, built a career on keeping institutions functioning under impossible circumstances. But I lost perspective. Started seeing medical staff as liabilities to manage instead of professionals to support. That's on me. You fired me for saving a patient's life. I know, and I'm trying to make it right. Patricia pulled a folder from the bag beside her and slid it across the table. I've drafted a formal letter to the state nursing board requesting immediate reinstatement of your license with a full apology for any misrepresentations in my initial report. I'll sign it today and send it certified mail. Sarah opened the folder. The letter was there, typed on Crestview Regional letterhead, professionally worded, accepting full responsibility for wrongful termination and confirming Sarah's actions were medically appropriate and potentially life-saving. Why now? Because I watched the news coverage, read the comments, saw what people are saying about you, about me. I know how this looks, but I also know that continuing to fight this publicly only makes everything worse for both of us. Patricia leaned forward. The board wants me gone. Fine. I'll resign, but if I resign quietly and you accept this apology, we can both move forward. You get your license back, your reputation restored, and I'll make sure you're compensated for the distress this caused. Compensated how? Crestview will pay you $250,000. Severance, emotional distress, wrongful termination settlement, whatever legal framework makes it clean, plus a letter of recommendation from the board that'll get you hired anywhere you want to work. Patricia's eyes were intense. That's more than most nurses make in 5 years. Enough to start over anywhere, do anything. All you have to do is agree to stop cooperating with Diana Reeves's investigation. There it was, the real offer beneath the apology. Sarah kept her expression neutral. You want me to lie to state investigators? I want you to decline to participate. You're not obligated to provide testimony. Tell them you've moved on, you don't want to revisit the trauma, whatever reason feels authentic to you. They can't compel you to cooperate unless they subpoena you, and that takes time. By then, the media attention will have faded and we can all move past this. What about the other nurses you fired? The 15 people Diana found who were terminated for the same reasons I was? Patricia's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. 3 years of pattern and practice. Firing nurses who questioned your decisions, who complained about delayed care, who put patients before your policies. Diana has the files, Patricia. She knows what you've been doing. Those were legitimate terminations for documented violations. Every one of them was reviewed by legal counsel and found to be appropriate. Then why do you need me to stay quiet? The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Patricia's hands stopped shaking and settled flat on the table, perfectly still now, and something in her expression shifted. You think you're special, Patricia said quietly. You think because you went viral, because some Marines made you their cause, because the media loves a hero story, that you've won. But you haven't. You've made yourself a target. Is that a threat? It's reality. The healthcare industry protects its own, Sarah. Administrators talk to each other. We serve on boards together, attend conferences, share information about problem employees. You cooperate with Reeves's investigation, you become the nurse who destroyed a hospital director's career. No administrator will ever trust you. No hospital will hire you because they'll be terrified you'll turn on them the second you disagree with a decision. So you're saying take the money and disappear or spend the rest of my career blacklisted. I'm saying choose wisely, because the world you think you're fighting for, where nurses are valued and protected and administrators are held accountable, that world doesn't exist. What exists is a system that chews up people who make waves and spits them out. You can take $250,000 and build a new life, or you can fight for principles that won't matter when you're unemployed and unhireable. Sarah picked up the phone from the table and stood. I think we're done here. $250,000, Sarah. Think about what that means. Think about your daughter's student loans. Think about retirement, security, freedom, all for just walking away from something that's going to happen whether you participate or not. You're right about one thing, Sarah said. It is going to happen whether I participate or not. Diana has enough evidence to bear you. My testimony just makes it faster. She walked out of the cafe into morning sunlight that felt too bright, too clean after the darkness of Patricia's desperation. Her hands were steady as she got into her car, but her heart was pounding. The phone buzzed immediately, Lynn's voice over the speaker. We got everything. Clear recording. All of it. That was a textbook attempt at witness tampering. Where do I go? Back to the county building. Diana wants to debrief. Sarah drove on autopilot, her mind replaying Patricia's words. The threat beneath the offer, the casual cruelty of describing systematic retaliation as if it were just smart business, the assumption that money could erase principles. At the county building, Diana was waiting with Lynn and two other people Sarah didn't recognize. A man in his 40s wearing a suit and a woman about Sarah's age with sharp eyes and a federal badge clipped to her belt. Sarah Holland, this is Marcus Webb from the State Attorney General's office and Agent Caroline Strickland from the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Division. Diana's voice was tight with controlled anger. We've been listening to your conversation with Patricia Vance. Agent Strickland has some questions. They moved into a secure conference room. Strickland set up a recording device and read Sarah her rights, not because she was in trouble, but because her testimony might be used in criminal proceedings. Everything formal, everything documented. Ms. Holland, has Patricia Vance ever contacted you before today? No. Did you initiate this meeting? No, she texted me this morning requesting it. And during the meeting, did she offer you money in exchange for refusing to cooperate with the state investigation? Yes. $250,000 plus a letter of recommendation and formal apology to the nursing board, in exchange for declining to participate in Diana Reeves's investigation. Strickland made notes. Did she explicitly state that cooperation with investigators would result in professional retaliation? She said administrators share information about problem employees, that no hospital would hire me if I helped destroy a director's career, that I'd be blacklisted. That's conspiracy to obstruct justice and witness intimidation, Webb said flatly. Combined with the pattern Diana found, 15 terminations over 3 years, all retaliatory, we're looking at federal charges, civil rights violations, healthcare fraud. If we can prove Medicare billing irregularities, possibly manslaughter if patient deaths can be directly linked to staffing decisions. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. How many patients died? Diana pulled up a file on her laptop. We've identified 7 deaths in Crestview's emergency department over the past 3 years where outcomes might have been different with proper staffing. Heart attacks, strokes, sepsis cases, all conditions where immediate intervention matters and experienced nurses make the difference between life and death. 7 people. That's preliminary. Full investigation could find more. Diana's expression was grim. Patricia Vance systematically removed the best nurses from emergency services because they questioned her authority, replaced them with newer, cheaper, more compliant staff. Mortality rates increased, but she buried the statistics in quarterly reports where board members didn't look closely. Strickland leaned forward. Ms. Holland, we're building a case that will likely result in federal criminal charges against Patricia Vance and potentially other Crestview administrators. Your testimony is crucial, but I need you to understand what that means. You'll be cross-examined by defense attorneys who will try to discredit you. Your entire employment history will be scrutinized. This will be public, difficult, and potentially dangerous. Dangerous how? People facing life in prison get desperate. We'll provide security if needed, but I can't guarantee Patricia won't try something else. The bribery attempt this morning shows she's willing to break laws to protect herself. Sarah looked at the faces around the table. Investigators, prosecutors, people whose careers were built on cases like this. They needed her testimony, but they were also giving her an out, a chance to say it was too much, too dangerous. Someone else could carry this fight. When do you need my statement? Sarah asked. Today would be ideal, Webb said. The sooner we move, the less time Patricia has to destroy evidence or intimidate other potential witnesses. Then let's start. The statement took 4 hours. Sarah walked them through 14 years at Crestview Regional, detailing every incident she could remember where Patricia had pressured medical staff to delay care, where nurses had been written up for acting too quickly, where protocols had been weaponized against patient outcomes. She named the nurses she remembered who'd been terminated, 5 of them, and described the circumstances leading to their departures. She described the culture of fear Patricia had created, where nurses second-guessed life-saving decisions because they were terrified of retaliation, where doctors ordered tests they didn't think were necessary because administrators demanded defensive medicine, where patient care became secondary to liability management. By the time they finished, it was past noon and Sarah's throat was raw from talking. Diana walked her to the parking garage again. You did good work today. Painful work, but necessary. What happens now? Web files charges, federal prosecutors get involved, grand jury, indictments, arrests. It'll take weeks, maybe months, but it's happening. Diana paused at Sarah's car. The nursing board called me this morning. They're holding an emergency meeting Monday to review your case. With Crestview's statement supporting reinstatement and our investigation confirming your actions were appropriate, you'll have your license back by end of business. Just like that? Just like that. 48 hours from being professionally destroyed to fully reinstated. Diana smiled slightly. The system doesn't usually move this fast, but when federal investigators and television cameras are watching, bureaucracies suddenly remember how to function. Sarah's phone buzzed, Jessica calling. She let it go to voicemail. There's something else, Diana said. NBC contacted my office. They want to do a full feature on you and the investigation. 60 minutes, prime time, national audience. I told them they needed your permission. I don't want to be famous. You already are. Question is whether you control the narrative or let others define you. Diana's expression was serious. Patricia is going to hire expensive lawyers who will paint you as a reckless nurse who got lucky. They'll find every mistake you ever made, every patient complaint, every shift you called in sick. They'll try to destroy your credibility before this ever reaches trial. An NBC feature lets you tell your story first, completely, in your own words. Sarah leaned against her car, exhausted and overwhelmed. I'm a nurse. I save lives. I don't do television interviews and policy reform and federal investigations. You're also the woman who exposed systematic corruption that killed patients. Like it or not, that makes you more than just a nurse now. Jessica's voicemail notification appeared. Sarah played it on speaker. Mom, holy shit. NBC wants to interview you. Please say yes, please. This is huge. People need to hear what you went through. I'm so proud of you. I can't even... Just call me back. Love you. Diana was watching her. What Patricia said about being blacklisted, there's truth in that. Hospital administrators do talk. Some will see you as a liability. But you know what else they'll see? Someone whose name recognition could boost their facility's reputation. Someone patients trust because they saw you fight for them on national television. Someone who proved she puts lives before politics. You sound like you're trying to sell me on something. I'm trying to help you see that what feels like the end of your nursing career might actually be the beginning of something better. Different, but better. Sarah drove home in a fog of exhaustion and disbelief. Her house felt smaller somehow, like she'd outgrown it in the space of 3 days. Einstein greeted her with typical feline indifference, demanding food while simultaneously judging her for being gone. She fed the cat, showered, changed into comfortable clothes, and collapsed onto her couch. Her phone showed 47 missed calls, over 100 texts, and email notifications numbering in the thousands. One text stood out, from Cole Brennan. Patricia tried to buy you off, didn't work. Good, she's done. Question is what you do next. Call if you need anything. How did he know about the meeting? Sarah almost texted back to ask, then realized she didn't want to know. Cole had resources and connections that operated in spaces she didn't understand. Maybe that was for the best. Another text from Dr. Keating. Offer still stands. VA needs you. Let me know. And one from Howard Garrett. Board-approved director position pending your decision. $140,000 starting salary, full benefits, complete authority over emergency services protocols. We need you, Sarah. Crestview needs you. She set the phone down and closed her eyes. Somewhere in Dalton Springs, federal agents were probably drafting arrest warrants. Diana Reeves was compiling evidence that would destroy careers and potentially send people to prison. Patricia Vance was consulting with lawyers who charged $1,000 an hour. Marcus Whitfield was probably drinking himself into oblivion, knowing his medical license was about to be revoked. And Sarah Holland, veteran trauma nurse, was sitting on her couch trying to figure out who she was supposed to be now that everything had changed. The doorbell rang at 4:37 p.m. Through the peephole, Sarah saw Rachel Torres standing on her porch holding a pizza box and a 6-pack of beer. She opened the door. How did you know where I live? Cole knows everything. Also, you need to eat, and you definitely need company. Rachel walked in without waiting for invitation, set the pizza on the kitchen counter, and opened 2 beers. You look like hell. Thanks. I mean it as a compliment. People who look perfect after the kind of day you've had are probably sociopaths. Rachel handed her a beer. Eat, drink, tell me what Patricia offered you. How do you know she offered me anything? Because I would have. If I was facing federal charges and needed someone to disappear, I'd try money first. Rachel took a long drink. How much? $250,000. Rachel whistled low. That's serious money. For a nurse's salary, that's life-changing. She wanted me to stop cooperating with the investigation. Of course she did. What did you tell her? I walked out and gave federal prosecutors a 4-hour statement detailing every illegal thing she's done in 14 years. Rachel grinned. That's my girl. Eat your pizza before it gets cold. They ate in Sarah's kitchen while Rachel filled her in on the day's developments from the biker community's perspective. Apparently, the story had spread through military veteran networks across the Southwest. Multiple motorcycle clubs were planning a rally outside Crestview Regional, demanding accountability. A Vietnam vet had started a GoFundMe to help with Sarah's legal expenses if Patricia tried to sue for defamation. You've got an army, Rachel said. People you've never met who are ready to fight for you. That's rare. I didn't ask for an army. Doesn't matter. You've got one anyway. Rachel finished her beer and opened another. Question is what you do with it. Cole's been getting calls from veteran organizations wanting you to speak at events. Talk about standing up to corrupt systems, fighting for what's right, that kind of thing. I'm not a speaker. You're a nurse who saved a Marine while her bosses told her to let him die, then got fired for it, then fought back and won. That's a hell of a speech right there. Rachel's expression sobered. Look, I get it. You didn't sign up to be a symbol or a movement leader or whatever. You just wanted to do your job. But sometimes history picks people, and they don't get a choice about whether they're ready. Sarah's phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Sarah Holland? Yes. This is Senator Catherine Morrison, Arizona State Senate. I chair the Healthcare Oversight Committee. I've been following your situation, and I'd like to invite you to testify at a hearing we're convening next month regarding administrative retaliation in healthcare settings. Your experience is exactly the kind of first-hand testimony we need to draft meaningful reform legislation. Sarah met Rachel's eyes across the table. The biker raised her beer in a silent salute. When's the hearing? Sarah asked. November 15th. We'll cover all expenses and provide support staff to help you prepare. This is a chance to make sure what happened to you drives actual policy change. Can I think about it? Of course. My office will send formal details via email. Thank you for considering it, Ms. Holland. What you did took courage. A lot of people are watching to see what happens next. The call ended. Rachel was smiling. You're going to do it. I didn't say that. You didn't say no, which means you're thinking about it, which means you're going to do it. Rachel stood and cleared their plates. You want my advice? Do I have a choice? Stop fighting what you're becoming. You're not just a nurse anymore. You're the woman who proved the system can be beaten if someone's brave enough to stand up. That matters. Own it. After Rachel left, Sarah sat in her living room with Einstein curled in her lap, watching the sun set through her window. Her phone continued buzzing with messages, calls, opportunities, demands. The world wanted pieces of her she'd never offered to give. But beneath the exhaustion and overwhelm, something else was building. A sense that maybe Diana and Rachel and everyone else was right. Maybe this wasn't the end of her nursing career, but the beginning of something that mattered more. She thought about the 15 nurses Patricia had fired, about the 7 patients who died because experienced staff had been replaced with cheaper, more compliant workers, about every healthcare worker who'd ever been punished for caring too much, moving too fast, choosing patients over protocols. Her phone buzzed again. Diana Reeves. Federal prosecutors just filed charges. Patricia Vance arrested at her home 30 minutes ago. Charges include conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness tampering, civil rights violations, and involuntary manslaughter. Thought you should know. Sarah read the message 3 times. It was done. Patricia was in custody. The woman who destroyed careers and enabled deaths to protect her authority was now facing decades in prison. Justice, delivered faster than Sarah had imagined possible. Another text from Diana. Press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m. Federal Building. They want you there if you're willing. Show the public that whistleblowers are protected, that doing the right thing matters. Your call." Sarah looked at Einstein, who'd opened one eye to judge her with typical cat disdain. "What do you think?" she asked. The cat closed his eye and went back to sleep. Sarah typed her response. "I'll be there." She spent the evening preparing, reviewing her statement, anticipating questions, mentally rehearsing how to stay calm under camera lights while prosecutors announced charges against her former employer. Jessica called 3 times, offering to fly home for moral support. Sarah told her to stay in California, finish her semester, trust that her mother could handle this. At midnight, unable to sleep, Sarah pulled out Jace's challenge coin from her pocket and studied it under the lamplight. The inscription read, "Earned, never given," above the Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor. She'd earned this. Everything that came next, the testimony, the hearings, the interviews, the transformation from nurse to advocate, she'd earned it by doing what was right when everyone else had chosen what was easy. Her phone lit up with one final message. This one from a number she didn't recognize but somehow knew belonged to Patricia Vance's lawyer. "My client maintains her innocence and looks forward to her day in court. She regrets that you chose to participate in what amounts to a witch hunt against dedicated healthcare administrators. You'll be hearing from us." Sarah deleted the message without responding. Tomorrow, she'd stand in front of cameras and federal prosecutors and tell the world what happened when profit margins mattered more than patients. She'd become the face of a fight she'd never wanted but couldn't walk away from. Tonight, she was just a nurse who'd saved a life and refused to apologize for it. She fell asleep on the couch with Einstein purring against her chest and the challenge coin heavy in her palm, dreaming of parking lots and epinephrine and the sound of helicopters descending like salvation from a desert sky. At 6 a.m., her phone exploded with notifications. The arrest had made national news, major networks, cable channels, social media platforms. Hospital director arrested in healthcare corruption scandal ran across every screen, with Sarah's face appearing in half the coverage. By 7 a.m., 3 news vans were parked outside her house. By 8 a.m., Cole and Rachel had arrived to escort her to the federal building, their motorcycles forming a protective corridor through reporters who shouted questions she didn't answer. By 9:30 a.m., Sarah stood in a federal building conference room being briefed by prosecutors on exactly what would be said, what questions she might face, how to handle hostile press. And at 10:04 a.m., she walked into a press conference room packed with cameras and reporters and took her seat beside federal prosecutors who were about to announce that the woman who'd tried to destroy her was now facing 25 years in prison. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Ortiz with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything, stepped to the podium and began speaking. But Sarah's attention was caught by movement in the back of the room. A young woman in marine dress blues standing at attention, saluting her across the crowd. And beside the Marine, Jace Brennan, recovered and whole, watching the woman who'd saved his life take her place at the center of a fight that would change healthcare forever. Sandra Ortiz's voice cut through the press conference room like a blade through silk, precise, controlled, devastating. At approximately 6:45 p.m. yesterday, federal agents arrested Patricia Ann Vance, former director of Crestview Regional Medical Center, on charges including conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness tampering, civil rights violations under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242, and 7 counts of involuntary manslaughter. She paused, letting the weight of those final words settle over the room. Our investigation reveals a 3-year pattern of systematic retaliation against healthcare workers who prioritize patient care over administrative directives. This retaliation resulted in the wrongful termination of 15 nurses and contributed directly to preventable patient deaths. Camera flashes erupted, reporters shouted questions. Sandra raised a hand for silence. Additionally, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, former chief of emergency medicine at Crestview Regional, faces charges of criminal negligence and failure to provide emergency medical care. Both defendants are currently in federal custody pending arraignment. Sarah sat perfectly still at the table beside Sandra, aware of every camera trained on her face, every microphone capturing her breathing. She'd been told to remain silent during the announcement, let the prosecutors handle the narrative, but her hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough that her knuckles went white. The victim whose near-death experience initiated this investigation, Marine Corporal Jace Brennan, survived solely due to the immediate action of registered nurse Sarah Holland. Sandra turned slightly towards Sarah. Ms. Holland administered life-saving emergency treatment while hospital administrators ordered her to stand down. She was subsequently terminated for her actions. Today, we're here to say that her termination was not only wrongful, it was part of a criminal conspiracy that endangered lives and violated federal law. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Is Ms. Holland suing the hospital? Sandra looked to Sarah, who leaned toward her microphone. No, I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in making sure this never happens to another nurse or another patient. What about your nursing license? The State Nursing Board is meeting Monday. Based on evidence provided by the Department of Health Services investigation, I expect full reinstatement with commendation for appropriate emergency response. Another reporter stood. Ms. Holland, Patricia Vance offered you $250,000 to drop your cooperation with investigators. Why did you refuse? Sarah met the camera's lens directly. Because 7 people died while Patricia Vance systematically removed nurses who would have saved them. No amount of money makes that acceptable. The room fell silent. Sandra resumed control. We'll take a few more questions, but I want to emphasize that this investigation is ongoing. We believe additional administrators at Crestview Regional may have enabled or participated in the retaliatory pattern. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Division. The press conference continued for another 20 minutes. Technical questions about charges, timelines for trial, potential sentences. Sarah answered when prompted, her voice steady despite the surreal sensation of watching her private nightmare become public vindication. When it finally ended, Sandra walked Sarah out through a side exit where Cole and Rachel waited with 2 federal agents providing security escort. You did well in there, Sandra said. Calm, clear, credible. That's going to matter when defense attorneys start attacking your character. When does that start? Probably tomorrow. Vance's legal team will leak stories to friendly media outlets, paint you as a rogue nurse with a history of protocol violations, claim you coordinated the whole thing for attention, anything to shift blame away from their client. Sandra's expression hardened. Let them. Every lie they tell gives us more evidence of consciousness of guilt. Cole guided Sarah toward his motorcycle. We should get you home. Your house is surrounded by press. Then where? Rachel spoke up. My place. Guest room's ready, it's off the grid, and I've got security that'll make sure nobody bothers you. Sarah climbed onto the back of Cole's bike for the second time in 3 days, this time feeling less terrified and more numb. They rode through Dalton Springs in a convoy, Cole and Rachel flanking her, 2 other riders ahead, 3 behind. Protection she'd never asked for but desperately needed. Rachel's house was 20 minutes outside town, a renovated ranch property surrounded by desert and barbed wire fence. Solar panels, rainwater collection, the kind of self-sufficient setup Sarah associated with survivalists. But inside it was comfortable, lived-in furniture, books everywhere, photos of Rachel with fellow veterans spanning decades. Make yourself at home, Rachel said, showing Sarah to a bedroom that was simple but clean. I'm going to make calls, coordinate with Cole's people about media management. You rest. But Sarah couldn't rest. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out her phone, and scrolled through the explosion of coverage. Every major news outlet had picked up the arrest. Social media was on fire. Hashtags trending, debates raging about healthcare corruption, nurses sharing their own stories of retaliation. One video had gone viral, security footage from the Crestview parking lot, the moment Sarah injected Jace with epinephrine while Patricia stood watching. Someone had added dramatic music and text overlay. She was fired for this. 20 million views in 6 hours. Jessica called. Sarah answered. Mom, you're everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Everyone's covering this, and the comments. People are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse who did her job. You're a nurse who exposed corruption that killed people. That's literally heroism. Jessica's voice cracked. I'm so proud of you I can barely speak, and so angry that you had to go through this. It's almost over. No, it's just beginning. Mom, you have to see what's happening. Nurses across the country are coming forward with their own stories. Hospitals are being investigated in 5 different states. You started something huge." Sarah closed her eyes. "I just wanted to save a patient." "And you did. But you also proved the system can be held accountable. That matters." They talked for another 30 minutes before Jessica had to go to class. After hanging up, Sarah lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened in 72 hours. Thursday afternoon, fired, destroyed, career over. Friday. Viral news story, military intervention, hospital board meeting. Saturday, federal arrest, press conference, becoming the face of healthcare reform. The whiplash was almost physically painful. Her phone buzzed. Diana Reeves. State Nursing Board moved up their meeting. Tomorrow, Sunday, 2 p.m. Emergency session to address your case. They want this resolved before the media pressure gets worse. Sarah texted back, "I'll be there." Another message came through, this one from Howard Garrett. Board voted unanimously to rescind your termination and offer reinstatement as Director of Emergency Services. Compensation package attached. Please consider it. Sarah opened the attachment. Salary, benefits, authority to completely restructure emergency protocols, freedom to fire administrators who interfered with patient care. Everything she'd need to rebuild what Patricia had destroyed. But working at Crestview meant returning to the place that had tried to destroy her. Walking those hallways, facing staff who'd watched her get escorted out, rebuilding trust in an institution that had valued liability over lives. She set the phone down without responding. Rachel knocked and entered with dinner, grilled chicken, vegetables, bread that smelled homemade. "Eat. You haven't had real food since this morning." They ate at Rachel's kitchen table while the sun set outside, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Rachel talked about her own transition out of the military, the struggle to find purpose after years of defined mission and clear objectives. "You're feeling it now," Rachel said. "That loss of identity. You were a trauma nurse for 23 years. Now you're something else, and you don't know what yet." "I just want my license back. Want to go back to work." "Doing what? Working night shifts for another hospital that might pull the same crap Patricia did? You're not that person anymore, Sarah. The system broke you and you broke it right back. That changes what's possible. I'm not a reformer. I'm not an activist. You're whatever you choose to be. The question is whether you choose based on who you were or who you're becoming." Sarah had no answer to that. Sunday morning arrived too fast. Sarah woke at dawn, showered, dressed in the same professional clothes she'd worn to the press conference. Rachel drove her to the state capitol in Phoenix, where the nursing board held their emergency session in a conference room that felt too small for the number of people trying to attend. Sarah entered to find the room packed. Nurses in scrubs still wearing hospital badges, retired healthcare workers, reporters, camera crews. The board members sat at the front table looking uncomfortable with the attention. The board chairman, a woman in her 60s named Dr. Ellen Park, called the session to order. "We're here to address the case of Sarah Elizabeth Holland, RN, whose license was placed under review following reports of protocol violations at Crestview Regional Medical Center." Dr. Park shuffled papers. "Since receiving that report, this board has reviewed extensive evidence including security footage, witness statements, and findings from the Department of Health Services investigation." She looked directly at Sarah. "Ms. Holland, please approach." Sarah walked to the front of the room, every step feeling like crossing a threshold between past and future. Dr. Park continued. "The initial report submitted by Patricia Vance alleged that you administered medication without authorization, violated hospital protocols, and endangered a patient through reckless action. Having reviewed the evidence, this board finds those allegations to be not only false, but maliciously fabricated to conceal administrative negligence." Murmurs rippled through the room. "The video evidence clearly shows you performing textbook emergency anaphylaxis response under extreme time pressure. Your actions were medically appropriate, professionally executed, and directly responsible for saving Corporal Brennan's life. Any other course of action would have resulted in his death." Dr. Park stood. "Therefore, this board votes unanimously to immediately reinstate your nursing license with full privileges, clear your record of all disciplinary action, and issue a formal commendation for exemplary emergency medical response. Additionally, we are recommending you for the Arizona Nursing Excellence Award for courage under pressure and commitment to patient advocacy. The room erupted in applause. Sarah stood frozen, processing words that didn't feel real, reinstated, commended, recognized for doing exactly what she'd been punished for 72 hours earlier. Dr. Park extended her hand. On behalf of the Arizona State Board of Nursing, I apologize for the distress our review process caused. You are the kind of nurse every patient hopes for and every hospital should value. Thank you for your service. Sarah shook her hand, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. After the session, she was mobbed by nurses wanting to share their stories, thank her for standing up, tell her she'd given them courage to report their own experiences of retaliation. Sarah listened to each one, collecting names and contact information, passing them to Diana Reeves, who stood nearby taking notes. Cole appeared through the crowd. "We need to go. There's something you should see." They drove back to Dalton Springs in Rachel's truck, arriving at Crestview Regional Medical Center just before sunset. The parking lot was filled with people, hundreds of them, holding signs and candles, gathered in what appeared to be a vigil. Sarah got out of the truck slowly, reading the signs. "Thank you, Sarah. Nurses save lives. Patricia Vance, justice served. We stand with healthcare workers." A young nurse Sarah recognized from her years at Crestview approached, tears streaming down her face. "We wanted you to know we're sorry. We should have stood with you Thursday. We should have fought back, but we were scared." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I was scared too." "You did it anyway. You saved him anyway. You fought them anyway." The nurse wiped her eyes. "That matters. You showed us it's possible." More staff members approached, nurses, orderlies, even a few doctors, each with their own apology, their own story of times they'd stayed silent, times they'd followed orders they knew were wrong, times they'd chosen safety over patients. Howard Garrett appeared from the hospital entrance, flanked by board members. He approached Sarah with an expression that was equal parts embarrassment and determination. "Ms. Holland, the board is meeting inside. We'd like you to join us." Sarah followed him into the hospital that had fired her 4 days earlier. Staff members lined the hallways, applauding as she passed. Melody, the young triage nurse who'd watched everything unfold, was crying openly. The boardroom had been reconfigured. Instead of board members sitting in judgment, they'd arranged chairs in a circle, collaborative rather than hierarchical. Howard gestured to a seat. "Please." Sarah sat. "I want to start by apologizing," Howard said. "Not just on behalf of this board, but personally. I've served on this board for 12 years. I approved Patricia Vance's hire, I approved her policies. I ignored warning signs because we were profitable, our metrics looked good, and challenging her seemed like unnecessary conflict." He paused. 7 people died because I prioritized convenience over accountability. That's on me." Other board members added their own admissions. The woman in pearls who'd moved to terminate Patricia admitted she'd heard complaints about retaliation, but dismissed them as normal workplace friction. A younger member confessed he'd never actually reviewed mortality data, just trusted administrators to flag problems. "We failed this institution and the patients it serves," Howard continued. "We're committed to rebuilding, but we need leadership that actually understands patient care. We need someone who's proven they'll put lives before policies. We need you." Sarah looked around the circle at faces showing genuine remorse mixed with desperate hope. "You fired me," she said quietly. "Escorted me out like a criminal. Let Patricia destroy my career without question, and now you want me to fix what you broke?" "Yes," Howard said simply. "Because you're the only person we can trust to actually do it. You've proven you can't be bought, intimidated, or silenced. That's exactly who this hospital needs leading emergency services." "What about the other nurses Patricia fired? The 15 people who lost their careers before cameras were watching? We're reaching out to all of them, offering reinstatement, back pay, formal apologies. It won't undo the damage, but it's a start." Sarah stood and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Below, the vigil continued, candles flickering in the desert twilight. People gathered in memory of patients lost and celebration of justice served. "If I take this position, I do it my way. Complete authority over protocols, hiring, staffing. No administrator overrides medical decisions. No policies that prioritize liability over care. And the first thing I do is implement mandatory reporting for any pressure to delay emergency treatment. Done, Howard said. All of it. And I want Diana Reeves to audit every administrative decision made in the past 5 years, every termination, every policy change, every budget cut that affected patient care. Complete transparency. Agreed. Sarah turned back to face them. I also want a seat on this board. Medical perspective needs equal weight with administrative and financial concerns. Patients deserve that. The board members looked at each other. Howard nodded slowly. We'll need to amend the bylaws, but yes. First medical professional board member in Crestview's history. It's appropriate. Then I accept. The relief on their faces was palpable. Sarah left the hospital an hour later with a contract that transformed her from fired employee to executive leadership, from victim of the system to architect of its reformation. Cole and Rachel were waiting outside, leaning against their motorcycles and watching the vigil. Well, Rachel asked. I'm the new director of emergency services. Cole grinned. Taking over the department that destroyed you, that's poetic. It's strategic. I can protect the next nurse who does what I did. Make sure no one else gets fired for saving lives. And Patricia? She's facing trial in federal court. 7 counts of manslaughter, witness tampering, civil rights violations. Her lawyers are already arguing she was just following standard administrative practices. But Sandra Ortiz has 14 other hospitals on record saying no. Actually, most administrators don't fire nurses for saving patients. Rachel pulled out her phone. You should see this. Just posted 20 minutes ago. The video showed Marcus Whitfield's arrest outside his home that morning, cameras capturing him being led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched. His medical license had already been suspended pending criminal trial. He's cooperating with prosecutors, Cole said, giving them everything on Patricia in exchange for reduced charges. Turns out loyalty only lasts until someone's facing 30 years in prison. Sarah watched the video without satisfaction. Marcus had been weak, not evil. He'd chosen hierarchy over conscience, but he hadn't orchestrated the systematic destruction Patricia had. He deserved consequences, but not the same level of damnation. Her phone buzzed, Senator Morrison's office confirming her testimony slot for the November healthcare oversight hearing. Another message from NBC requesting interview dates. A third from the American Nurses Association inviting her to speak at their national convention. You're going to need a publicist, Rachel observed. I'm going to need a vacation, Cole laughed. After. First you've got trials to testify at, hearings to attend, a hospital to rebuild, and a movement to lead whether you want to or not. I never wanted to lead anything. Nobody asks for that kind of responsibility, but you earned it. Cole's expression grew serious. You know what's going to happen now. Every nurse who's ever been pushed around by administrators is going to contact you. Every patient who's lost someone to hospital negligence will want your help. Every reporter writing about healthcare corruption will want your quote. You're the face of this fight, Sarah. That's not going away. Sarah looked at the candles flickering in the parking lot, at the faces of people who'd driven hours to stand vigil for a woman they'd never met, but whose story had given them hope. Then I better figure out what that means. The next 3 weeks moved at whiplash speed. Sarah's nursing license was fully reinstated with commendation. She started at Crestview as Director of Emergency Services, spending her first week interviewing every nurse Patricia had fired and offering them reinstatement with back pay and formal apologies. 12 of the 15 accepted. She fired 3 administrators who'd enabled Patricia's retaliation campaign, demoted 2 others, and promoted 4 nurses into leadership roles. Implemented new protocols requiring mandatory reporting of any administrative interference with emergency care. Created an anonymous hotline for staff to report pressure to delay treatment. Within 2 weeks, emergency department mortality rates began to drop. Patricia Vance's trial was scheduled for January, but her legal team was already floating plea deal proposals, reduced charges in exchange for testimony against other administrators, shorter sentences for cooperation. Sandra Ortiz rejected every offer. 7 people had died. There would be no easy exit. Marcus Whitfield took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison, permanent revocation of his medical license, cooperation with ongoing investigations. His testimony revealed that Patricia had specifically instructed him to delay treatment if it might create liability exposure, even in life-threatening situations. The Department of Health Services expanded their investigation to 37 hospitals across Arizona, finding similar patterns of retaliation at 11 of them. Directors resigned, boards scrambled to implement reforms, nursing associations demanded federal oversight. And Sarah stood at the center of it all, giving testimony, conducting interviews, speaking at conferences about what happens when administrators forget that hospitals exist to save lives, not protect profits. On a Tuesday in late November, she testified before Senator Morrison's Healthcare Oversight Committee in a hearing room packed with media, nurses, and administrators nervously taking notes. The system doesn't fail accidentally, Sarah told the assembled legislators. It fails because people choose policies over patients, profits over care, hierarchy over healing. Patricia Vance didn't wake up one morning and decide to endanger lives. She made small compromises every day, prioritizing metrics over outcomes, silencing dissent, removing anyone who challenged her authority. Those small compromises accumulated into a system that killed 7 people while nurses who could have saved them were too afraid to act. She looked directly at the senators. You want to prevent this? Stop treating healthcare workers as expendable. Create protected reporting for administrative retaliation. Mandate medical oversight on hospital boards. Fund investigations into mortality rate increases. And most importantly, believe nurses when they tell you something's wrong. We're the ones at the bedside. We know when the system is failing. Listen to us before more people die. The committee room erupted in applause. After the hearing, Sarah was approached by a representative from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. They wanted her to consult on a national task force developing whistleblower protections for healthcare workers. She said yes. December brought Patricia Vance's trial. Sarah testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through every detail of Jace's collapse, Patricia's orders to stand down, the 90 seconds that nearly cost a Marine his life. Defense attorneys tried to paint her as a rogue employee with a history of insubordination. Sandra Ortiz demolished that narrative with evidence showing Sarah's 14-year record of exemplary service, commendations from patients and doctors, 0 disciplinary actions before Thursday's termination. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Patricia Vance received 23 years in federal prison, no parole eligibility for 15 years. Her legal team immediately filed appeals, but Sarah knew they'd fail. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimony devastating, the verdict righteous. Sarah wasn't in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She was at Crestview Regional, working a shift in the emergency department she now oversaw, because being director didn't mean abandoning bedside care. She was suturing a child's laceration when her phone buzzed with the news. 23 years. She finished the sutures, smiled at the brave kid who hadn't cried once, and stepped outside into cool desert air that tasted like closure. Cole called minutes later. Justice served. For 7 families who lost people they loved, yes. For the nurses she destroyed, yes. For every patient who'll be safer because she can't hurt anyone else, yes. You don't sound satisfied. I am, but satisfaction doesn't bring back the dead. It just makes sure they're remembered. Fair enough? Jace wants to see you. He's in town tonight, brief leave before deployment. Says he owes you a proper thank you. They met at a steakhouse downtown. Sarah and Jace and Cole and Rachel celebrating victories that felt both enormous and insufficient. Jace was in dress blues, preparing to ship out to Okinawa in 3 days, healthy and whole and alive. I've been thinking about what to say, Jace began, but everything sounds too small. Thank you doesn't cover saving someone's life. Neither does gratitude or appreciation or any other word I can find. You don't owe me anything, Sarah said. I owe you everything. My career, my future, every breath I take. That's because you refused to follow orders that would have killed me. He pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. This belonged to my grandfather. He carried it through Vietnam, gave it to me when I enlisted. I want you to have it. It was a challenge coin, different from the one he'd given her in the hospital. This one was older, worn smooth by decades of handling, inscribed with words Sarah could barely read. Those who have courage to act when others hesitate. Jace, I can't. You already did. You acted when everyone hesitated. That's worth more than any coin, but it's what I have to give. He closed her fingers around it. Thank you, Sarah, for my life. She couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat, so she just nodded and held the coin tight enough to feel its edges pressing into her palm. Later, standing outside the restaurant under stars that looked impossibly bright against the desert darkness, Cole pulled her aside. You know what you've built, right? You turned personal disaster into systemic reform. Turned getting fired into changing how hospitals function. Turned being silenced into becoming a voice for everyone who's ever been afraid to speak up. I just did what was right. That's what makes it matter. You didn't do it for glory or attention or career advancement. You did it because a patient was dying and someone had to act. Cole's expression was serious. The movement you started, nurses reporting retaliation, hospitals implementing protections, legislators drafting reform bills, that's your legacy, whether you want it or not. I want to go back to just being a nurse. You are a nurse, but you're also the woman who proved nurses can't be thrown away for caring too much. Both things can be true. Sarah drove home that night thinking about legacy and responsibility and the weight of becoming a symbol when all she'd wanted was to save a life. Einstein greeted her with typical disdain, demanding food and attention in equal measure. She fed the cat, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on her couch scrolling through messages. One from Jessica. Mom, my advisor wants to use your case study in her healthcare policy class next semester. Can I tell her yes? One from Dr. Keating. VA offer is still open. We'd be honored to have you, but I understand if Crestview needs you more. One from Howard Garrett. Emergency department mortality rate is down 34% since you took over. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And one from a nurse in Oregon. I reported my administrator for pressuring me to delay stroke treatment. They tried to fire me, but I showed them your story and threatened to go public. They backed down. Thank you for showing us we can fight back. Sarah set down her phone and looked at the 2 challenge coins sitting on her coffee table, one from Jace's platoon sergeant, one from his grandfather, both inscribed with messages about courage and action and refusing to back down when lives were at stake. She thought about Patricia Vance sitting in a federal prison cell, her career destroyed, her freedom gone, her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about what happens when administrators forget that power exists to serve, not to dominate. She thought about the 7 patients who'd died, the 15 nurses who'd been fired, the countless others who'd suffered because one person valued control over compassion. And she thought about the changes rippling outward from one Marine collapsing in a parking lot and one nurse refusing to let him die. New laws, new protections, new conversations about how healthcare workers deserve to be valued instead of vilified. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but instinct made her pick up. Sarah Holland? Yes. This is Dr. Margaret Chen from Johns Hopkins Medical Center. I'm calling to invite you to be our keynote speaker at the National Emergency Medicine Conference next April. We'd like you to address systemic barriers to patient advocacy and strategies for institutional reform. Sarah looked out her window at desert darkness stretching endlessly, dotted with lights from houses where people lived normal lives, unburdened by the weight of being a symbol or a movement or a voice for the voiceless. Can I think about it? Of course. My office will send details. Ms. Holland, what you did, what you're still doing, matters to every emergency medicine provider in this country. We hope you'll consider sharing your insights. After the call ended, Sarah sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started writing. Not a speech or testimony or interview response, but a letter to every nurse who'd ever been punished for caring too much, who'd ever been told to wait when waiting meant death, who'd ever chosen patience over policies and paid the price. She wrote about fear and courage, and the moment when you decide that doing right matters more than staying safe. About the system that chews up healthcare workers and spits them out, and the responsibility to change that system instead of just surviving it. She wrote until 2 a.m., until her hands cramped and her eyes burned, until she'd emptied everything she'd learned in the past 6 weeks onto the page. Then she sent it to Diana Reeves with a simple note. Use this however it helps. Diana responded immediately. This is perfect. Publishing it tomorrow in partnership with National Nurses United. It's going to reach millions. Sarah closed her laptop and went to bed. The next morning, she woke to discover her letter had gone viral, shared by nursing organizations, medical journals, patient advocacy groups. Comments flooded in from healthcare workers across the country sharing their own stories, thanking her for putting words to their experiences, finding courage in her example. She read them over coffee while Einstein judged her from the counter, then dressed for another day at Crestview Regional, where she'd rebuilt the emergency department that had tried to destroy her. Walking into the hospital felt different now. Staff members greeted her with respect instead of fear. Nurses asked questions without worrying about retaliation. Doctors collaborated instead of dictating. The culture Patricia had poisoned was slowly healing, one shift at a time. Sarah spent the morning reviewing new protocols, the afternoon training staff on mandatory reporting procedures, and the evening working bedside because that's where she belonged. She sutured wounds, stabilized traumas, saved lives with the same steady hands that had injected epinephrine into Jace Brennan's thigh 6 weeks earlier. At 7 p.m., her shift ended. She walked out through the same automatic doors where Jace had collapsed, stood in the parking lot where her career had ended and begun again, and watched the sun set over Dalton Springs. Her phone buzzed. Cole. Bike rally this weekend. 20 clubs riding to Phoenix to support healthcare workers' rights. You should lead us in. Sarah smiled and typed back, I'll be there. Because Rachel was right. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was the woman who'd proven the system could be held accountable, who'd turned getting fired into a movement, who'd shown that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. She was Sarah Holland, Director of Emergency Services, keynote speaker, federal consultant, and the nurse who'd saved a Marine while the world watched. But more than any of that, she was the person who'd chosen a patient's life over her own career and proved that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't just save one life, it changes everything. She got in her car and drove home through desert twilight, past the rest stop where she'd sat defeated 4 days after being fired, past the county building where Diana had shown her the evidence that destroyed Patricia, past the federal building where justice had been announced to the world. At home, Einstein demanded attention. She fed the cat, made dinner, and sat on her couch reading messages from nurses who'd reported their own administrators, from patients whose lives had been saved by healthcare workers who'd learned from her example, from legislators drafting bills to protect whistleblowers. The movement Cole had talked about was real and growing. Hospital administrators across the country were implementing reforms, not because they suddenly developed consciences, but because they'd watched what happened to Patricia Vance and decided they didn't want to be next. Sarah's phone rang one final time. Sandra Ortiz. Just wanted to let you know, Patricia's appeals were denied. Sentence stands. She'll spend the next 15 years minimum in federal prison. Good. Also, the investigation expanded. We've identified 19 other hospitals with similar retaliation patterns, federal charges pending against 6 more administrators. This is going to be a multi-year prosecution effort, and we'll need your testimony for several trials. I'll be there. I figured you would be. You know what the defense attorneys are calling you? What? The nurse who broke the system. They mean it as an insult, but I think it's accurate. You broke a system that needed breaking. Now maybe we can build something better. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her living room holding the 2 challenge coins and thinking about legacy and responsibility, and the strange path that had led from a parking lot crisis to federal courtrooms to national reform. She hadn't wanted any of this, hadn't asked to be a symbol or a movement leader or a voice for the voiceless. But Jace Brennan hadn't asked to collapse from anaphylaxis 10 feet from an emergency room. The 7 patients who'd died hadn't asked to be killed by administrative negligence. The 15 nurses who'd been fired before her hadn't asked to be destroyed for caring. Nobody asked for the fights that define them. They just choose whether to run or stand. Sarah had stood. And in standing, she'd proven that one person refusing to back down could shake institutions, end careers, change laws, and give hope to thousands of healthcare workers who'd been waiting for someone to prove that fighting back was possible. The system had tried to destroy her for saving a life. Instead, she destroyed the system's ability to keep hurting people. That was justice. That was legacy. That was enough. Sarah set down the challenge coins, turned off the lights, and went to bed knowing that tomorrow would bring more interviews, more testimony, more responsibility. But also knowing that somewhere tonight, A nurse would stand up to an administrator who'd told them to wait while a patient died, would refuse orders that prioritized policy over survival, would choose courage over compliance, and they'd do it because Sarah Holland had shown them it was possible, because she'd proven that the people who save lives matter more than the people who write policies, because she'd reminded every healthcare worker in America that their first duty wasn't to administrators or institutions or liability protection. It was to the patient dying in front of them. And no system, no matter how powerful, could take that away. Not anymore. Not ever again.